Chapter 431, What's Going On? Just as the people in the square were concentrating on the discussion, there were already 3 elders sitting on the upper platform. They were Zhijiangshan's cousins and the highest-ranking people qualified to enter the platform, but they never cared about family affairs. Next to them was the ruling group headed by Ziqingshan, the contemporary head of the family. Ziqingshan was very calm, and behind him sat the core members of his faction, all discussing something about him. Xuanhuan was sitting next to Ziqingshan, and behind her were several ladies of the Zi family, who were trying to please her. Since Xuanhuan had a great influence on the Zi family, all the others here were from the same generation as Ziqingshan, whose seats were arranged according to their position in the family. It might be intentional that Ziqiang, Zixiniu, and Zishiya's parents, Zipeng and Dongling, were all arranged in the corner of the last row. Although the Zi family's seats were separated, there were some extra chairs for supporters at the back of each faction. There was no doubt that the number of chairs behind the 3 elders and the head of the family was the largest, and the lower the status, the fewer the chairs behind them. As for Ziqiang, only 6 or 7 family members would like to follow and sit behind him. It was a kind of competition. It was about the influence and competitiveness of all factions. As a family with a history of 100 years, the Zi family had 40 or 50 direct descendants, and the population of the whole family, including the descendants of other lineages, had already exceeded 100, which made it a small society and naturally bred different factions. There were 8 or 9 young direct descendants sitting here, most of which were members of Ziqingshan's faction. As for the branch descents like Zifeng, however excellent they were unqualified to step onto the upper platform, which showed the strict hierarchy of the Zi family. It must be Xuanhuan's idea to put us in the worst seats. She just wants to warn Yan, Dongling said in a low voice after taking a quick glance at Xuanhuan secretly. Well, even so, we can't help it. Xia said Yan's husband was very powerful, so I hope he can withstand the pressure. Zixiniu sighed helplessly. Husband? Did you say that too soon? Said Ziqiang with a snort. We haven't admitted this son-in-law. He still disliked the guy who stole his daughter. Well, do you mean that you don't want to recognize Meng as your granddaughter? Zixiniu knew her husband well, who had lived with her for many years, and shut him up with just one sentence. Ziqiang's volume was much lower as he said awkwardly, I certainly recognize that such a lovely girl is my granddaughter, but as for the guy surnamed Zhang, I'll investigate and test him. Zixiniu shook her head helplessly, looked at Dongling, and said, in fact, from his appearance, Zhang Han is very masculine and handsome, and I wonder how his character is. I heard from Xia, Dongling said with a smile, that he can cook, take care of children by himself, have a large company, and has more than 3 billion in savings. It's said that he started from scratch, which proves that he is really capable. Men who are capable and able to take care of their families are rare good men. I believe in Yan's vision. I hope it's true. What if he's a liar? Can Xia, a simple girl, see through his disguise? I must test that guy when he comes. Ziqiang sighed. They were chatting when they heard several exclamations from the crowd. Mr. Ling, the chairman of Chengjun Business, is coming. They looked in the direction of the voice and saw a man in his 30s coming up with his girlfriend. Is that Ziyu's partner? Dongling said in a low voice. He takes Ziqingshan as a backer and is introduced to many influential celebrities. Ziqingshan is apparently cultivating him as the next head of the family. As soon as she finished speaking, she saw Ziyu get up and go to meet the visitors with a smile on his face. Director Li, welcome, come in, please. Ziyu took Director Li to the area where his seat was located. How are you, elders and masters? Director Li said hello to the 3 elders and Ziqingshan. Fine, thank you. Ziqingshan nodded and smiled. Although Director Li was not qualified for Ziqingshan's attention, he chose to respect every partner of his son. The arrival of Director Li seemed to be a signal. Behind him, all kinds of influential celebrities entered the gate one by one. Mr. Ma of the City Entertainment Company, Director An of Gyeoksinko, Limited, Director Liu of the Ne branch. Of these celebrities, 70% came at Zikingshan's request and all sat beside him, while only a few belonged to other factions. For Ziking and Zipeng, there was no one familiar with them. After all, they were just the executives of a family company, and no one would pay attention to them. It was 9:40 in the morning. There were more and more visitors coming, and Ziking was now surrounded by more than 20 followers, but Ziking was still neglected, and even the few chairs behind him were secretly carried away by the servants. The status and influence of the Ziz were clear at a glance. But at this time, Xuanhuan didn't care if she would be looked down upon. She had been in a state of extreme anxiety and worry. There are more and more people. Ziking, Yan will come back with her daughter. Although it was impossible for Yan to marry others, what should they do if they are separated and severely punished in front of their child? Xuanhuan said sadly. Ziking's face darkened upon hearing those words. Xuanhuan has a sinister intention. Knowing that Yan is going to bring her daughter back, she still makes such arrangements, which is to put Yan in a desperate situation. Rules. These rules are rubbish. I won't tell Yan about this, and I want her to bring my granddaughter back. If Xuanhuan dares to punish them again, don't blame me for embarrassing her. Hearing her husband's words, Xuanhuan laughed. It's rare to see you acting as a spirited man. Anyway, I won't allow Yan's happiness to be destroyed. As they were talking, Xuanhuan looked at them and said in an indifferent tone, Ziking. As soon as she spoke, she attracted many people's eyes. She said, call Yan. It's 9:45 now. Doesn't she know she should come back earlier? What a rude girl. Does she want all the elders here to wait for her? Xuanhuan's words were disdainful and contemptuous. Everyone could feel that she was very dissatisfied with Ziking's family and was almost scolding them. Ziking's face suddenly darkened as he clenched his fist and stared at Xuanhuan. But under Xuanhuan's gaze, he didn't say anything. I asked you to call her. Didn't you hear me? Xuanhuan glared at him viciously. Well, Zikingshan smiled and shook his head. Don't be so serious. Though Yan didn't obey the family rule, we shall talk about it later after she comes back. Qiang, call your daughter and ask her when she will come back. It is impolite to make all the seniors wait for her. At this time, many guests began to look this way meaningfully. They also heard that Yan of the Zi family found herself a boyfriend without permission, and the Zi family planned to marry her to someone else. Although it sounded like a farce, they knew that it was in accordance with the rules of the Zi family. Just then, a cry of surprise came from the crowd. Liang Li, the elder of the Liang family, comes in person. The elder of the Liang family? Everyone present was astonished. His position and influence in Singapore are the same as Zhejiangshan's, the elder of the Zi family. Even Zikingshan turned around quickly and didn't have time to make trouble for Ziking. More than 10 members of the Liang family were coming toward them. Almost all the guests focused on the Liang family. Liang Li, the elder of the Liang family, was nearly 90 years old. Although he was aged, his pace was still steady. After he took the lead in crossing the square and stepping onto the platform, many members of the Liang family stopped. And only 4 of them followed Elder Liang to enter the platform. The crowd began discussing. Hiss, I haven't seen Elder Liang for a long time. Elder Liang, Patriarch Liang, and 2 juniors of the Liang family. Why don't the other co-members follow them onto the platform? That's Liang Hao, the leader of the young generation of the Liang family. His younger sister, Liang Menkai, is beside him. They seem to be valued since they can follow Elder Liang. They're here for Elder Zi, aren't they? The Ziz all guessed that the only one that could invite Liang Li to attend the party was Zhejiangshan, their elder. Almost all the guests stood up, while Zikingshan and Xuanhuan even stepped forward to greet the Liang family. Nice to meet you, Elder Liang and Patriarch Liang, Zikingshan said with a smile. Elder Liang looks better and better. Welcome, please take your seat. The other guests also respectfully called out, Elder Liang. But Liang Li greeted them with a very indifferent expression. Tough, he was merely a heaven stage master, he had a high social status. Even in the face of the hospitable Ziqingshan, he only nodded gently in response, but did not sit down as invited. Instead, he began scanning all the members of the Zi family. What is he looking for? All the people in the room were surprised and followed him to look left and right. Finally, Patriarch Liang beside Elder Liang pointed to one corner of the room. Liang Li stepped in that direction. Ziqingshan and Xuanhuan were stunned. What is going on? But what happened next froze their expressions. They saw Liang Li go straight toward Ziqiang and give him a smile. A smile? Can you believe it? Everyone at present was confused. How can Elder Liang ignore the head of the Zi family and greet Ziqiang with a warm smile? Are you Ziqiang? Liang Li came near and asked with a smile. Yes, I am. Ziqiang was a little confused and hurriedly replied. Ha ha ha, good, very good. Liang Li clapped Ziqiang on the shoulder with a smile and said, you have a good daughter. Ziqiang looked at Liang Li in a daze, not knowing what to do. And are you Xixiniu? Liang Li looked at Xixiniu. Yes, nice to meet you, Elder Liang. Xixiniu smiled. Well, you're so lucky, Liang Li said with a smile. Then he looked at the Ziz sitting in the back and said, take me to visit Brother Jiangshan. Yes. Liang Li was led inside by the Ziz. Brother Ziqiang, let's sit down and have a talk, Patriarch Liang said politely. Ah, well, please take a seat, Patriarch Liang. Ziqiang hurriedly made a gesture. Patriarch Liang quickly waved his hand and said, Brother Ziqiang, just call me Brother Liang from now on and don't be so polite to me. Huh? Ziqiang was taken aback. That's Patriarch Liang, a celebrity with the same status as Ziqingshan, who is several levels higher than me. How dare I call him Brother Liang? What's going on? Chapter 432, arriving one after another. Ziqiang felt that his brain was no longer working, and so did Ziqingshan and the other guests. What's going on? What's all this about? Liang Li comes in person, but ignores Ziqingshan. Instead, he greets Ziqiang, who is in a low position. This made Ziqingshan feel very embarrassed. Even Xuanhuan's face darkened. After all the people sat down again, their conversation was much quieter, and they looked in the corner from time to time. Nice to meet you, Patriarch Liang. Zipeng and Dongling also greeted the Liangs. They thought that Patriarch Liang would not pay attention to them. But the latter replied with a smile, nice to meet you. You are Zipeng and Dongling, right? Just call me Brother Liang if it is convenient for you. This. When Zipeng was about to say something in confusion, Patriarch Liang looked at Ziqiang again and whispered, Brother Ziqiang, Sister Xu, you really have a good daughter. Hearing this again, Ziqiang was in a daze. Liang. Ziqiang wanted to call him Patriarch Liang but paused when he thought of what Patriarch Liang had just told him. In the end, he just asked the question, what does this mean? Huh? Don't you know? Patriarch Liang asked in surprise. What am I supposed to know? Ziqiang was more confused. Your daughter is married to a talent. Patriarch Liang lowered his voice as if telling a secret. Mr. Zhang, your daughter's husband is a talent. He is amazing. This. Ziqiang hesitated for a while then finally asked, how do you know about my daughter? I told him, Liang Mengkai said with a grin. I've been eating in the boss's restaurant. The boss's sister Ziyan's husband. At first, I fell in love with him. Mengkai, what are you talking about? Patriarch Liang was startled and gave the girl a quick stare. He. Liang Mengkai was not afraid of it, she said with a smile. Later, I found out that the boss was Sister Ziyan's uncles and Aunt Xu. You can't imagine how handsome and powerful the boss, no, Ziyan's husband is, and he is even good at cooking. The cheerful and lively Liang Mengkai spoke more and more happily, and her voice got louder and louder. Xuanhuan, who had been paying attention to them, vaguely heard Ziyan's husband. This reminded her of the Liang family's disregard for her just now, which made her more embarrassed and angry. The family head is still sitting here, and I'm here, too. What do you Liangs mean by going to chat with a family member of low status? Therefore, when Xuanhuan heard these words, her face darkened and she said, I'm sorry, but Xian of the Zi family has no so-called husband. According to the rules of the Zi family, she will be punished severely if she dares to get married without permission. It's 10 minutes to 10. I'd like to see whether she obeys the rules or not. When her statement came to an end, Xuanhuan was almost scolding Xian. This made the people who had been talking suddenly go silent. Ziqingshan's face was expressionless, and his eyes flickered slightly after hearing the words, but he didn't say anything. Although Xuanhuan's attitude may embarrass Patriarch Liang, their attitude just now also embarrassed me. He was still wondering why the Liangs wanted to talk with Ziqiang, and why Elder Liang treated them warmly. According to their chat just now, is it because of Xian or her husband? No. Ziqingshan thought that it was probably because of the good relationship between Liang Hao and Xian, and the Liangs were here to support them. After thinking about it, he felt that Xuanhuan also knew this and dared to scold Xian's parents directly in front of the guests, so he didn't have to say anything more. Xuanhuan's words silenced many people on the scene, and they felt that she was deliberately targeting Xian's family. Patriarch Liang frowned as if he wanted to say something, but he finally snorted and didn't make any comments. Liang Mengkai secretly rolled her eyes at Xuanhuan, and then went over to Ziqiang and Zixiniu and whispered, Does she want to punish Sister Xian? She is daydreaming. Uncle Ziqiang and Aunt Xu, you can rest assured that Sister Xian's husband dotes on her very much. If anyone dares to bully her, the boss can dismantle this place. HMPH. Huh? Ziqiang and Zixiniu exchange a confused look. What's all this about? At the same time, the crowd at the bottom circular square were chatting while paying attention to the platform. In the area where Zifeng was located, one of the young generation of the Zi family was surprised to see this and asked, why did Elder Liang and the Liangs go to the last row to say hello? What's going on? Patriarch Liang is sitting behind Uncle Ziqiang. It's impossible. Nothing is impossible. Zifeng suddenly said. He looked into the distance with full expectation, looking forward to the day when the family rules were broken. The prosperity of the family depended on if the capable people were given the opportunity and status to use their talents, rather than on the bloodline theory. As a collateral offspring, Zifeng had been conscientious, but could not get the recognition of the family. He had been suppressed for too long, and the attitude of the Liang family undoubtedly gave him hope. At that moment, more than 10 people came from the square entrance, and everyone's attention was attracted again. It's the Zhao family. Do they come at the invitation of our family leader? The crowd began discussing. Soon, they came to the platform. Like the Liang family, while most of them stayed in the square, only 3 of them went on the platform. Brother Qingshan, I heard that you had a party today, so I came here uninvited. Please forgive me. Patriarch Zhao laughed. How come? It's my pleasure. Ziqingshan got up to meet him, smiled, and said, Brother Zhao, please come in. Okay. The Zhous were invited to sit down. They had just talked for a while, and some really influential people came one after another. Chiharan, Patriarch of the North District, arrives. Mr. Liao of Huguang Technology arrives. Patriarch Bao of the South Island arrives. Most of these celebrities in Singapore were related to Ziqingshan's faction. They soon occupied all the seats around the Zi family head and began talking with a smile. This made Xuanhuan feel proud again, and she looked at the last row where Ziqiang was located with disdain. Only Patriarch Liang is there. Ha ha. Only the Liang family is here to support you. Is that useful? Xuanhuan almost showed a smile of victory ahead of time. The 10 minutes passed in a flash, and soon it was 10 o'clock in the morning. At this time, Xuanhuan glanced at the back and knew that almost all the members of her faction had arrived. Although there were many people from other factions, there were still fewer than Ziqingshan's followers in number. But Why doesn't the Fan family arrive? We all agreed yesterday that it would start at 10 o'clock. Xuanhuan and Ziqingshan had some doubts. Xuanhuan wanted to wait a little longer, but she checked the time and found it was 10:02 a.m. She never liked to wait for others. Considering the strength and influence of the Fan family, she could bear it, but what about Xian? So she looked at Ziqiang at once, frowned, and snapped, "Ziqiang, Xixiniu, come here." Swish, swish, swish. Everyone looked over and fixed their eyes on Ziqiang. Ziqiang and Xixiniu hesitated for a while, then they got up and went over. Many of the followers behind Ziqingshan were looking at Ziqiang meaningfully. The time was up, but the main character of the party hadn't arrived yet. They knew they were going to see some fun. "Ziqiang, Xixiniu, what's the matter with you? What time is it? Where is she? Shall we all wait for her here?" Xuanhuan began scolding them. "Do you know how to obey the rules? Are you too comfortable? I'll tell you." Xuanhuan's words made Ziqiang so angry that his expression changed several times in a short time. Patriarch Liang, sitting next to Ziqiang, frowned and was about to stand up. Suddenly, a loud voice came from the square. "Liu Qingfeng, chairman of the Liu group of Hua Nation, arrives." Swish. Under the crowd's gaze, Liu Qingfeng, his male bodyguard, and secretary Xiaoling strode onto the platform. Although Liu Qingfeng didn't have as many assets as the Zi family, he was a legendary businessman with a complex network of relationships. With a strong backing, he could go further and had made greater achievements, which made no one dare look down on him. Xuanhuan gave up the reprimand and looked at the new guest suspiciously with Ziqingshan. Why does Liu Qingfeng come? The Zi family has no business relationship with him. No matter how surprised he was, Ziqingshan stood up to welcome Liu Qingfeng. "Nice to meet you, Chairman Liu." Ziqingshan smiled. "Welcome. Nice to meet you, Patriarch Zi." Liu Qingfeng smiled and nodded, looking at the people in the room with some doubts. When he had just entered through the gate, he felt something unusual here. "Here, this way, please," Ziqiang said politely. Although Liu Qingfeng was not prominent in Singapore as a member of the top class, his interpersonal network in Hua Nation was amazing. For any overseas family, it would be easier for them to enter the Hua Nation market if they could have a good relationship with Liu Qingfeng. Therefore, Liu Qingfeng's position overseas was actually higher than that in Hua Nation. However, Liu Qingfeng did not move at the invitation of Ziqingshan. Ziqingshan felt a little surprised. Is he also? When the thought just came into his mind, he heard Liu Qingfeng ask in a loud voice, "Who is brother Ziqiang?" Swish. Once again, the focus of everyone's attention turned to Ziqiang. Liu Qingfeng fixed the crowd with a piercing stare. It seems that Ziqiang's position in the Zi family is not high, and someone even makes him a target of persecution. Ha ha ha. Liu Qingfeng chuckled, avoided Ziqingshan, and walked to Ziqiang's side directly. He grasped Ziqiang's hand and said enthusiastically, "Brother Ziqiang and Sister Xu, Qingfeng pays his regards to you." Everyone was a little confused, especially Ziqingshan, who was looking at that corner in a complicated mood with mixed feelings. "What's the matter? Can't I be better than Ziqiang?" Liu Qingfeng's greeting frightened Ziqiang. He quickly nodded and replied, "You're most welcome, Chairman Liu. This way, please." Ziqiang led the way to the last row. At this time, the head of the Liang family also sat back with a trace of irony in his eyes. The fun is going to start. Maybe Ziqingshan's faction will be destroyed because of these ridiculous family rules. Just as they were about to sit down, Xuanhuan suddenly asked seriously, "Ziqiang, I just said that your daughter didn't obey the family rules. It seems that I haven't finished my words nor asked you to go back. Why don't you behave yourself?" Ziqiang stopped and looked at Xuanhuan coldly. "Do you think I'm easy to bully, since I'm scolded by you again and again in public?" When he was about to refute angrily, Liu Qingfeng beside him replied to Xuanhuan with a louder voice, "How could such a family event allow a woman to show off her power here, who is not following the rules? The obvious sarcasm changed the expression of all the people present, especially those of Ziqingshan's faction. Patriarch Liang almost burst out laughing. Liu Qingfeng is a straightforward person indeed. While Ziqingshan had been embarrassed to the extreme, Fang Huan stood up and said coldly with a darkened face, "This is the Zi family, how can you accuse me here? No one has invited you. If you don't want to stay here, then leave." The instant she finished speaking, the atmosphere immediately became frosty. How can she say such unkind words on such an occasion? The Zi family and Liu Qingfeng may become enemies. However, Liu Qingfeng didn't care about this kind of thing. He looked Fang Huan up and down and said casually, "Who are you? You think I'm here because of you?" He smiled sarcastically, looked at Ziqiang again, and said with respectful expression, "Brother Ziqiang, Sister Xu, please take a seat." "Okay, okay." The dazed Ziqiang and Xixiniu sat down. "Ziqiang, come here." Fang Huan shouted angrily. "What do you want to ask? Come here by yourself. Do you have broken legs or are you too heavy?" Liu Qingfeng glared at Fang Huan, and then said, "Brother Ziqiang, don't give in to that disgusting person. If you really can't help it, why not come to my group as vice chairman, brother? As long as you agree, I'll draft the contract now." Liu Qingfeng's words made everyone dizzy. What have I experienced in this period of time? What happened? Ziqiang was totally muddled. Looking at Liu Qingfeng's sincere face, he realized that if he agreed, Liu Qingfeng would make him the vice chairman. "Chairman Liu, why do you do this?" Ziqingshan couldn't bear it anymore. He narrowed his eyes and said slowly, "Isn't it impolite? It's not rude. I came here from Linhai to witness Mr. Zhang's proposal. Brother Ziqiang is Mr. Zhang's father-in-law. How can you scold him?" Liu Qingfeng said frankly. His words shocked everyone present. "Mr. Zhang? Is Ziyan's husband influential?" At this time, Ziqingshan and Fang Huan also began to think about it. "Brother Ziqiang, I'm lucky to meet Mr. Zhang and glad to be his partner, so what I said just now was serious. If Brother Ziqiang is interested in the position, how would you like to be the vice chairman of my group?" Liu Qingfeng looked at Ziqiang with expectation. Originally, Liu Qingfeng just wanted to show his kindness to Ziqiang, but he hadn't expected that Ziqiang's position in the Zi family was so low that he would even be scolded on the spot. Liu Qingfeng's eyes lit up. What a good opportunity. My chance has come. If Ziqiang agrees to be the vice chairman, according to Mr. Zhang's character, our Liu group will surely make great progress and surpass ourselves. At this time, Fang Huan sneered, "Father-in-law, Liu Qingfeng, is it too soon for you to say that? If he wants to marry a woman from the Zi family, he must ask for our consent first, and the main purpose of today's gathering is to discuss our marriage plan with the Fan family. Yesterday, we reached a consensus with the Fan family head, and this has been settled." At this time, the guests finally understood that all this was the same as what they had heard. Ziyan had a boyfriend, but the Zi family refused to recognize him. Instead, they made a marriage agreement for Ziyan with the Fan family. This choice could be understood because the cooperation with the Fan family was the most suitable for the Zi family in their current condition. However, Fang Huan's words were not finished when a stern reprimanding resounded throughout the square. Nonsense. Almost everyone looked in the direction of the voice. Fang Huan's expression froze after she saw clearly who the guest was. The Fan family had arrived. However, the reprimand just now came from the elder of Fan family, Fan Qingfeng. Him. Elder Fan arrives. There was a great uproar around them. He hasn't appeared for a long time. I didn't expect that this master would come here in person today. In the square, Zifeng suddenly narrowed his eyes in astonishment. Fan Qingfeng, the elder of the Fan family, is much higher than our elder in status. Why does he come in person? Who does he come for? What's more, he knew that Fan Qingfeng was a respected Wu Dao grandmaster. Just when everyone was wondering, Fan Qingfeng took the lead to step onto the platform. Apart from Fan Qingfeng and Patriarch Fan, all the guests arriving from the Fan family stayed in the square. What made Ziqingshan puzzled was, Fan Zigang, the leader of the young generation of the Fan family, is absent. Why does the elder of the Fan family come in person? Seeing Elder Fan coming up, Ziqingshan controlled his puzzled expression and took the lead to welcome them with Fang Huan and the other members of his faction. "Welcome, Mr. Fan, please take your seat," Ziqingshan said respectfully. "Take a seat?" Fan Kungfing glared at him, snorted coldly, and walked directly away from him to the side. Someone has snubbed Ziqingshan again. Someone has walked to the right side again. Everyone's eyes gradually became wide in astonishment. Is he also going to Ziqiang? Sure enough, just as they were thinking about it, they saw Fan Kungfing go over to Ziqiang, smiling warmly and saying, "Ziqiang, Xixini, you really have a good girl. Don't say that, Mr. Fan." Xixini seemed to have guessed something, and her eyes lit up as she hurriedly replied, "Ha ha ha, I'll go to see Brother Jiangshan for a chat. You young people just chat here. I'll be back to visit Mr. Jiang later," Fan Kungfing said as left with a smile. Everyone present was shocked with eyes wide open. Isn't that what Elder Liang said when he just came here? The Liang family, Liu Qingfeng, and the Fan family, hiss. Thinking about it, many guests and the Zi family members changed their expressions. A second thought incurred profound fear, because they noticed that all these people mentioned a name, Mr. Jiang. They had vaguely felt that it seemed like the Zi family was going to welcome a giant. Is Xian's man particularly powerful? Ziqingshan and Fang Huan were also in doubt at this time, and they even didn't know what to say. They could only sit awkwardly back in their chairs and keep quiet. Everyone was looking at the corner on the right. "Mr. Fan, please take a seat." Ziqiang smiled and made a respectful gesture. "Please take your seat, too," Patriarch Fan said repeatedly. From the manner and attitude of Patriarch Fan, it could be seen clearly that he defined his position to be under Ziqiang's. Patriarch Fan looked around and said hello to Patriarch Liang, Liu Qingfeng, Zipeng, and Dongling one by one. In front of his seat, he looked at Ziqingshan with a pale expression and said in a loud voice, "Before I sit down, I want to clarify something. Patriarch Zi, why do I hear the news from the Zi family that you want to marry Xian to our Fan family? This is ridiculous, and totally out of the question. I hope you can make a good investigation and find out who is spreading rumors. Xian is a talented and beautiful girl, and I hope you don't listen to and spread rumors, or you will be the enemy of the whole Fan family." With that, Patriarch Fan sat down directly. On the platform, there was silence. Fang Huan's face was gloomy, and she felt as if she had been slapped in public. Others, however, felt a strong sense of suffocation. The enemy of the whole Fan family. The implied meaning of the few words was so serious. Who can be treated so respectfully like this by the Fan family? Who is Mr. Jiang? At this moment, almost everyone present was acutely aware of the strong wind before the storm, which was sweeping through the whole Zi family, making them shiver. In silence, everyone, including the younger generation of Fan family in the lower square, was focusing on Ziqiang's side. Patriarch Liang, Elder Liang, Patriarch Fan, Elder Fan, and Liu Qingfeng were all standing at the top of society. They were much more powerful than the sum of all their followers behind Patriarch Zi. It was really amazing. Among them, Zifeng, who had not been taken seriously all the time, was shaking in excitement and roaring inside. The rules are going to be broken. Soon, Ziqingshan saw the current situation clearly and knew that he was lower than Patriarch Fan in position after all, so he smiled reluctantly and said apologetically, "It's just a rumor indeed. I'll find out who spread it and give a reasonable explanation to Patriarch Fan." However, Patriarch Fan didn't even pay attention to him, but began to talk with Ziqiang and Xixini with a smile. This made Ziqingshan's mouth twitch in anger, especially when looking at Ziqiang. "I'm the head of the Zi family. I'm a man who can decide the life and death of others. How is it that you, a low-ranking person, can be treated so well? For what?" At this time, the aged man sitting to Ziqingshan's left bonded. As the elder of Ziqingshan's faction, he felt that he had to do something now, So he stood up, looked at Ziqiang, and said with a smile, Patriarch Fan, Patriarch Liang, and Chairman Liu, I'd like to ask you something. Could you please come over and have a talk? Swish. Everyone looked over and fixed their eyes on him. Is this about grabbing partners directly? But all those people are not Ziqiang's partners. No, it's comfortable to sit there. Liu Qingfeng refused without hesitation. Patriarch Liang shook his head with a smile and said, What's the matter with you, Elder? I'll call on you after today's event. I'm sorry, but I still have something to talk with Brother Ziqiang about, Patriarch Fan said. They all refused the invitation. The three guests' direct refusal triggered another round of discussion among all the people present. Hearing the discussion, the elder of the Zi family who had just stood up sat back down. Ziqiang and Fang Huan were too embarrassed to stay any longer. At that moment, Huang Yuan, Patriarch Huang, President of the Singapore Chamber of Commerce, arrives. Lu Xuanhuan, Patriarch Lu, arrives. Mr. Gu, Chairman of the Dongxing Group, arrives. Mr. Bai of the Heoyong Group arrives. Chairman Nu of the Fanny-U Trading Company arrives. The expression of the crowd changed many times. Under everyone's gaze, 5 men walked to the platform surrounded by a large group of people. Then they left their followers behind and stepped onto the platform themselves. However, the influence of each of them was no less than Ziqiang's. They were real business giants. Under their leadership, the Chamber of Commerce accounted for half of Singapore's business. Today, the 5 of them came to the Zi family together? Question mark. All the young people in the square were stunned. It was amazing. Even those who followed them, but were not qualified to go to the platform, were actually in high position. The people on the platform all stood up. Ziqiang hesitated before taking a step. He was worried that these big shots were here for Ziqiang as well. If that was the case, he would lose all the dignity of being the head of the family. Hiss. Ziqiang took a deep breath and stepped out to meet the guests. Chapter 433. His identity. President Huang, Patriarch Lu, Mr. Gu, welcome, welcome, please come inside, Ziqiang said, with a warm smile, as he greeted them. At this time, everyone's eyes on the platform were focused on the new guests, especially the members of Ziqiang's faction, who held their breaths nervously. This could be taken as a war on social relationships. Then, if the 5 men, including Huang, came for them, they would enjoy an overwhelming advantage. Each of these 5 represented a stronger family than the Zi family. However, they saw Huang and the other guests responding to Ziqiang's greetings with only an indifferent expression and a slight nod, without even saying anything more. At this moment, with a thud, Ziqiang and Fang Huang's hearts did a flip, and the 2 of them felt as if they knew what was going to happen next. Are they also coming for Ziqiang? A lot of people had the same idea. At the next moment, the case was totally solved. After scanning the whole platform, Huang Yuan and the other guests finally fixed their eyes on the last row on the right side. Then they ignored Ziqiang and Fang Huan, and walked directly toward that direction. That familiar expression, that familiar attitude, that familiar scene, all this seemed to turn into a mountain and was pressing down on Ziqiang. He trembled uncontrollably, and turned his head slowly and stiffly. What caught his attention was that Huang Yuan and the other guest, with warm smiles, stretched out their hands before they reached Ziqiang. Both hands. This showed that they considered themselves to be in a lower position than Ziqiang. Is it true? Many people could not believe their eyes. Why does Huang Yuan, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, need to reach out both hands to shake hands with a peer? As for Ziqiang, he was terribly frightened. For him, these people were the celebrities he usually needed to look up to. But they addressed him as brother today. If he didn't address them the same way, they would be unhappy. What do they intend to do? One surprise came after another. Ziqiang thought he was still in a dream state. Fortunately, Xuanhuan reacted faster. Seeing Huang Yuan's outstretched hands, she quickly touched Ziqiang and whispered, "Don't just sit there, come on." Okay. Ziqiang hurried to meet Huang Yuan. Brother Ziqiang, long time no see. In fact, I wanted to contact you a few days ago and invite you to be the vice president of our Chamber of Commerce. Huang said, holding Ziqiang's hand. He didn't know how influential his words sounded. Hiss. Many people took a deep breath. They all looked at Huang Yuan in astonishment. Being the vice president of the Chamber of Commerce, which dominated half of Singapore's business sector, meant having a great deal of social connections and resources. Ziqiang's butt had not even touched the chair yet. He was at a loss. When he heard that, slam, he slumped down in his chair, and looked at Ziqiang dazedly. Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce? I've been looking forward to getting his position for 3 years. I've put in a lot of effort, but I still can't get it. But now they want to give the Vice President's position to Ziqiang so easily? Why? For what? The people beside Ziqiang stopped talking, and stared at Ziqiang. Huang Yuan did not release Ziqiang's hand, while he said with a smile. But I don't know what is Mr. Zhang's plan now. If Brother Ziqiang stays in Singapore in the future, I will keep the post of Vice President open for you all the time. Ah, this? Ziqiang said in shock. Huang Yuan laughed and interrupted him. Brother Ziqiang, don't say no, that's the deal. After that, Huang Yuan released Ziqiang's hand and turned slightly. Mr. Gu and others beside him shook hands with Ziqiang warmly, one after another. They didn't say much, roughly as follows. Brother Ziqiang, you really have a good daughter, I envy you so much. Ziqiang had heard this statement several times today. This made him understand all these things, so at the end of the chat, he grinned and replied. Of course, my daughter has always been excellent. If Xian saw her father's expression at this time, she would have been unable to stop laughing. These 5 guests also greeted the Patriarch Liang and the others. There would be a problem when they were about to take their seats. There were only 3 seats left. So the 5 of them did not sit, but stood next to Ziqiang. There were many seats available at the back, together with the other members of the Zi family, but they did not even look at them. When Ziqiang saw this, he felt very helpless. After taking a deep breath, he stood up and said, Please bring more chairs for Mr. Huang and his group. The servants at the back hurriedly took a few chairs from the side. Then Huang Yuan and others sat down, and continued talking with Ziqiang. Seeing so many celebrities sitting behind them, Zipeng and Dongling exchanged a look. They were nervous and hesitant. Of course, Ziqiang and Xixiniu did not fare much better than them. But fortunately, Liang Mengkai always talked and laughed beside Xixiniu, and gradually made the atmosphere livelier. In the main seats, the 3 elders looked at Ziqiang from time to time, feeling that Ziqiang was going to get up. They can only watch the development taking place, although, according to the seniority in the Zi family, they should take the main seats, if social status was taken into consideration. They could not compare with 70% of the people present. Facing this situation, Ziqiang felt as if a crisis was forthcoming. He gave Fang Huan a fierce look. Fang Huan had been silent for a long time. In this case, only the mentally handicapped would not have been aware of what was going on. Everyone else was whispering to each other, and a few words could be heard. Who is Mr. Zhang? Pondering for a minute, Fang Huan looked at her watch. It was 10:10 a.m. So many things happened in just 8 minutes. There were so many important people here. These celebrities' neglect of Ziqiang made them feel so ashamed. In order to maintain the last shreds of her dignity, Fang Huan suddenly stood up and said, What Patriarch Fan said before is right. We have a cooperative relationship with the Fan family, but the marriage is a rumor. The reason for the party today is that first, we want to get together with you. Second, we want to confirm several cooperative relationships. Third, Xian of the Zi family is married, and her husband will be coming to propose today. According to the family rules, anyone who wants to marry my family must first obtain the consent of her parents, then the consent of the head of the family, and finally the approval of the elder. Fang Huan glanced at Ziqiang and continued. The elder is old, so the patriarch and I will represent him fully. If we don't agree, the marriage will not be allowed. But it remains to be investigated." Then she sat back. The crowd again started talking about this incident. Her meaning was nothing more than a warning to Ziqiang, not to be too proud, and the final decision would be made by the patriarch, even if you have all the great men standing behind you. So what? As long as I have a negative vote, this marriage will not be recognized. What a joke. Who can you represent? Does Grandmaster Zhang need you to recognize his marriage? Suddenly, a jeering laugh shook the whole square. Everyone turned their eyes and looked to the place where the voice came from, and were all stunned. They saw He Banqing, Patriarch He, and Elder He Chen, the Grandmaster He who had not been seen for a long time. A great patriarch and a Grandmaster. Wait. What did he just say? What did Grandmaster He just say? A Grandmaster? He is a Grandmaster. Is it true? Almost everyone on the platform was stunned because they found the impact of those words were too weighty. Grandmaster Zhang? They were not sure if they heard wrongly. But they definitely heard that very clearly. Together with Ziqiang, everyone slowly stood up and watched the arrival of He Chen and He Banqing. Ziqiang did not go and meet them. He knew that even if he went up, he would be ignored. Why should he make a fool of himself? Under the crowd's gaze, He Chen went to the center of the square, looked at Ziqiang and Xuanhuan with a stern face, and said coldly, "As the leader of the Zi family, you are so incompetent that you tolerate your wife's unbridled behavior here." Xuanhuan's face turned pale, and she did not even dare to look at He Chen and could only lower her head. Even people from the same faction as Ziqiang dared not look at He Chen, because they knew that Master He seemed to be very dissatisfied with them. Was it due to Xuanhuan's words? What could they do when they were publicly reprimanded by He Chen? They had to smile at him, even if he overturned their chairs. All this because he was a middle-stage Grandmaster. Elder He is right. Ziqiang raised his head. Even though he was very reluctant, he had to agree, but what made him more concerned was another matter. He stared at He Chen and asked in a trembling voice, "Elder He, what do you mean when you mentioned Mr. Zhang?" Others couldn't help but hold their breath with him, as they waited for He Chen's answer. He Chen glanced at Ziqiang and everyone present, and then said calmly, "Today is the day when Master Zhang is coming to propose marriage, so I am here to welcome Master Zhang personally." Kaboom! Everyone looked as if they had been struck by a thunderbolt. It affected most of the people present. Ziqiang, Xuanhuan, the three aged men, the faction beside them and all the followers behind them. Their faces was distorted with astonishment. A martial arts Grandmaster. He is indeed a martial arts Grandmaster. How's that possible? As they all knew, the position of a Grandmaster strong was equal to that of a famous family, but who would be treated with such reverence by He Chen? The thought made them shiver, and even their bodies could not help but tremble. There was only one sentence in their mind. Xian married a martial arts Grandmaster. This sentence echoed in Ziqiang's and Xuanhuan's minds. Oh my! Ziqiang was stunned. This. Xuanhuan didn't know what to say. My gosh, Yan's husband is a Grandmaster. Zipeng exclaimed. He. Just then, Liang Mengkai began to chuckle. She took Xuanhuan's arm and said, "Uncle Qiang, Aunt Xu, look, just as I said, the boss is very powerful. How about that? Are you surprised?" In the face of Liang Mengkai's question, the several uncles and aunts were in a confused state. Are we surprised? We were nearly scared to death. At this time, He Chen turned his gaze to Ziqiang, and walked towards the man with a smile. Ziqiang, Xuanhuan, you are the best. If only my daughter were like Xian, your precious girl and Master Zhang are really enviable. Under the dazed gazes of the others, He Chen came over and began chatting with Ziqiang. However, as soon as he sat down, a series of people came. They all came alone, but each of their influence and importance was frightening. Ziqiang had no chance to sit down again. Every time he saw a new guest, His face became paler than before. Guanlong, early stage Grand Master. He Zihua, middle stage Grand Master. Qigao, middle stage Grand Master. Leng Shaiji, middle stage Grand Master. One by one, the visitors gave all the people present a shock, and their attitude after their arrival made Fang Huan's face turn ashen. None of them paid any attention to Ziqingshan. After scanning the crowd, they all looked at He Chen and made respectful gestures, and laughed. Brother He, today we are all here to see Master Zhang. After saying that, they asked, who are Xian's parents? Each of them made a respectful gesture to Ziqiang and Xuanhuan after asking this question, and then congratulated them. The people present could not believe their eyes. They thought that such a famous person as Patriarch Liang would be the highest-ranking guest today. However, the family gathering was about to develop into a Grand Master gathering. 8 Grand Masters. They all came because of Xian's husband. What's his identity? A man who was able to make these famous middle-stage Grand Masters turn up with such enthusiasm. Is Master Zhang already at the late stage? Many people felt almost breathless, because of the impact of the news. Even Liu Qingfeng, Patriarch Liang and Patriarch Fan felt that their legs going soft, and unable to support them. There were martial arts masters all around. If they made some mistakes, they might be destroyed. The others were thinking that all those men over the patriarchs and grand masters. To be exact, there were 2 young people present. Liang Hao sat solemnly, looking left and right, but he did not dare to say anything. They are all great masters. Liang Mengkai was much more relaxed than Liang Hao, but when she was talking with Xuanhuan, her mobile phone rang. She answered the phone. Zhao Feng, when will you be arriving? It's busy here. But just now, Patriarch Zhen Fang Huan, the present masters had excellent hearing, and Liang Mengkai's words made them look at each other. That girl is talking about us. With the arrival of these masters, the temperature at the square dropped sharply. Finally, no one dared to speak loudly, and they were all looking at the direction of the right corner. All of a sudden, there was another exclamation. Secretary Yuan is here. Secretary Yuan? Ziqingshan and others were confused. They felt the name was familiar, but they could not remember who it was. They saw a group of more than 10 people walking towards this side. After they saw who the well-dressed leading man in his 50s was, Ziqingshan and many businessmen stood up in astonishment. Secretary of the Head. Hiss. Why was the name so familiar? Because the guest was the powerful Secretary Yuan. Many people ran over to welcome Secretary Yuan. In terms of strength, Secretary Yuan was just an ordinary person, but for all the businessmen present, he was in charge of the economic lifeline. More than 20 people, led by Ziqingshan, had just walked 7 or 8 steps. They saw Secretary Yuan and his entourage stepping onto the platform. Seeing them, Secretary Yuan waved his hand. Ziqingshan and the others stopped at once, surprised. Why is Secretary Yuan here? Is he also here for? As soon as they thought of it, Secretary Yuan said in a flat voice. Just go about your business. Don't bother about me. I'm just here today to receive General Zhang. Bang! Fang Huan, who had just calmed down and was about to have a sip of tea, suddenly dropped the cup to the ground, and she was stunned. General Zhang? Ziqingshan repeated these words with great difficulty. Hiss. General Zhang. A lot of people felt that their brains had been critically damaged. Is a master's identity not enough? A general? Secretary Yuan did not pay any attention to them. He looked at Ziqiang and walked toward him with a rare smile. Your daughter married a genius. Congratulations. Ziqiang shook hands with Secretary Yuan, in a daze. It is said that Secretary Yuan never smiles, but now, he is smiling at me. At that moment. Oh, it's very busy here. There was a sound coming from the side of the platform, and an old man with white hair and square face stepped onto the platform. The facial expressions of the crowd changed with his arrival. Su Long, the head of the spirit group in Singapore. He is a late-stage grandmaster, and he has not made an appearance for a long time. Spirit Group was an official organization of martial artists equal to the National Security Agency of Hua Nation. Su Long was the supreme officer of Spirit Group. He was a late-stage grandmaster, who was very well known for many years, and Su Mu from his family, was also the leader of the younger generation, in the martial arts circle in Singapore. Su Mu was a middle-stage grandmaster, and the most promising talent of the Su family who could surpass Su Long. He even came in person. Ziqingshan did not want to know why. The reason was obvious. They definitely did not come for Ziqingshan. He Chen, Guan Long, Chi Gao, Secretary Yuan, you are all here? Su Long greeted his friends casually. Chief Su, why are you here? Secretary Yuan said with a smile. Ha ha ha. Su Long walked to the right corner and replied. Director Zhang is coming to propose marriage, and I must come here to have a look, and at the same time, to prevent some short-sighted guys from offending him. According to his character, if he gets angry, the situation will be out of control. There are so many people here, how can I just stand by and watch? Director Zhang, Grandmaster Zhang is the director of the National Security Agency. He Chen was stunned. Even he was surprised. Not to mention the other people. Ziqingshan's eyes dulled, and the lack of oxygen in his brain almost knocked him out. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down, but his face was pale, and he felt that it would be better if he fainted. At this moment, there were only a few short sentences going around in everyone's minds. Martial Arts Grandmaster, General, Director of the National Security Agency. Any one of these titles represented great power and gave others a strong sense of oppression. However, he owns all these three titles. What kind of person did Yan marry? Zipeng looked at Ziqiang in confusion. She married a promising great man. Su Long took over the topic as he said this, then he looked back at the top of the mountain opposite the lake. He is coming. Su Long said slowly. Chapter 434, He's coming. When Su Long, the giant of the Singapore Spirit Group, said those words, all the people on the platform followed his gaze. Everyone on the platform was facing the lake, which surprised the crowd in the square. What are they doing? Facing the sea, with spring flowers blossoming? But it's just a lake. Almost everyone, even the waiters around, turned their eyes to look over there. The lake was rippling and its surface shimmered under the light of the sun. Around the lake, the breeze was blowing amid the willows, shaking their leaves, bringing the rustling sound to people's ears. The scenery was very beautiful. But, what are they focusing on? Many people were confused. Not far away, opposite the lake, there were several connecting mountains. The sun seemed to be hanging on the top of the mountain, and was a little dazzling. What are you looking at? Someone asked curiously. As soon as he said this, suddenly he stopped. All of a sudden, the dazzling sun seemed to be covered by a dark cloud, so people could open their eyes to look over at that side. It was only now that they saw what was happening. They were stunned, and their eyes widened. In front of everyone, a startling image suddenly appeared. More than 10 armed helicopters, all in a row, were coming to them. Zoom, zoom, zoom. The sounds of the propeller's rapid rotation were getting louder and louder. Everyone could not help holding their breath. They all knew that today's hero was coming, but the way he came back was a little unconventional. Under everyone's gaze, the row of helicopters drew closer and closer. When the helicopter group came near, the people in the square could see clearly that their formation was in the shape of an awl, and the one in the middle was the leader. Wee-oo, wee-oo, wee-oo. These helicopters were getting lower and lower, and the sounds of their propellers were getting louder and louder. Soon, the helicopters roared past the people's heads. The loud sounds made many people cover their ears, while the rapidly rotating propellers churned up a strong wind, which made their hair and clothes flap violently. Even the fancy hairstyles of the noble ladies and young talents were all blown out of their original shapes by the strong wind. But at this moment, no one dared to express dissatisfaction, because they knew that, on the platform, those rare magnates were all waiting for the man who had appeared from nowhere. His arrival was unnerving, but it also left a deep impression on many people's minds. Under the crowd's gaze, these helicopters reached above the golf course and hovered at the edge of the platform. Then they slowly turned around and landed. The wind was getting stronger and stronger, and even the grass on the lawn began dancing crazily in the wind. Finally, all the helicopters landed on the flat lawn, and the propellers gradually stopped rotating. Click, 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 click. The helicopter's doors were opened, and one passenger after another jumped out of it. Almost everyone was wearing formal clothes, like a huge best man team, of course, not including some aged people and women. Zhao Feng, Instructor Liu, Wang Zanping, Wang Zanzong, Wang Zanhong, Rong Jiaxin, Wang Ya. They got off the helicopters one after another, and began to look at the people on the platform. In fact, the two sides were looking at each other. On the platform, Su Long, the leader of Spirit Group, saw this, and his mouth quivered slightly. There are already 4 martial arts grandmasters in this group, and they did not bother to hide their strength at all. As soon as they got off the helicopter, all the grandmasters began releasing their powerful chi. If this was a martial arts exchange, the martial arts masters waiting in the square would now be releasing their chi to compete with them. But this was just the occasion for the man to propose marriage. It was frightening that he should be accompanied by 4 grandmasters. At this time, all the people on the platform stood up, and some of them even walked forward a little, intending to greet the visitors. He is coming. Ziqingshan's forehead was covered with sweat. He felt too stressed to breathe, so he looked at Fang Huan. I know what to do. Fang Huan's face was pale, as she was regretting what she had just said and done. Had she known that man had such a position of eminence, would she dare to say no? However, she was more worried that with such a backer, Ziqiang would threaten their position as the head of the family. Coming down. He's coming down. I want to know what the big man they're waiting for looks like. In the square, many young people were excitedly staring at the central helicopter and discussing with each other. His status is so high, and I'm afraid that his age might also. Maybe he is an old man. You may be right. Even that prince who visited last time was not given such a ceremonious treatment. Alas, if Xian marries an old man, it's really, really scary. Soon, the propellers and wind stopped completely. Someone opened the door of the central helicopter. Wow, isn't that a handsome man? Seeing Zhang Han jumping off the helicopter, many people could not believe their eyes. How come he is so handsome? Don't lie to me. How can there be a young, handsome and so capable man? Is he the driver? However, soon they were speechless. It was really Mr. Zhang. After Zhang Han jumped off the helicopter, he didn't look anywhere else. Instead, he looked behind him with a smile, stretched out his hands, and brought a little girl down. Then he took Xian's hand and helped her to get off the helicopter. Xian. Everyone's eyes were constantly scanning the faces of the family. The hostess was a drop-dead gorgeous woman, much like a fairy. The male host looked very masculine and easygoing. Obviously, he was a gentle father. Between the two of them, holding their hands, the little princess was walking step by step, just like lovely sprite. The 3 of them walked slowly to the platform in this way, while the others who got off the helicopter stood still until the family came to the front, and then began following them. Oh, my granddaughter is so lovely. Xuanhuan looked at them for a long time and finally fixed her eyes on Meng Meng's face and said happily, I'm going to receive them. Liang Mengkai said, then walked out quickly. She said hello first, then stood beside Zhao Feng and introduced several people to him. Zhao Feng nodded and whispered in Zhang Han's ear. At this time, Ziqiang and Xuanhuan were restless, and wanted to stand up to welcome them. He Chen, sitting behind them, smiled and said, Just sit the first. If you go to greet him, how can Mr. Zhang propose? Ah? Ziqiang looks at He Chen in a daze, and finally said in a muffled voice, okay. He felt dizzy, and even the breath of these people behind him could make him shiver, but the identity of his son-in-law was more frightening. Arts Grand Master, General, Director of the National Security Agency. Why is he so powerful? Will he be bad for my daughter? Will he have a bad temper? What if my daughter is being bullied? Ziqiang's thoughts were now in a whirl, and the only thing he could do was to examine Zhang Han with eagle eyes. He completely forgot that he wanted to ask, which bastard stole his daughter? Although Ziqiang and Xu Xianyu were still sitting, the others could not bear the silence. Including Ziqingshan and Fang Huan, nearly everyone present stood up, and half of them went out to greet Zhang Han. General Zhang, on behalf of the officials of Singapore, I would like to welcome you. Secretary Yuan put out his hand and greeted him politely. Well, hello. Zhang Han shook hands with him, and nodded slightly in response. Instructor Liu had contacted the local authorities in advance. Without their permission, the fleet that had more than 10 helicopters, could not have flown here directly. Director Zhang, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Spirit Group. Su Long waved at Zhang Han, smiling. Nice to meet you. Zhang Han smiled. I heard about the great deeds of Master Zhang a few days ago, and you are really famous. Nice to meet you. I'm Guan Long. Guan Long smiled at Zhang Han. Grandmaster Zhang, Mr. Zhang. All the others greeted Zhang Han, one by one. Zhang Han had already known what would be happening, so he responded to all the greetings with a smile, especially in the face of He Chen, because most of the celebrities had been invited by He Chen. When Zhang Han was saying hello, the little princess beside him was looking around curiously. There are so many people here, they are very polite to Papa, but they don't care about Meng Meng and Mama. Do they want to take Papa away from us? The little girl held Zhang Han's hand even more tightly. He's my Papa and you can't take him away from me. Xian had been smiling modestly, but from time to time her eyes would shift to her parents, sitting at the back. Zixia took the lead in running back and chatting with Dongling. After the group of people finished greeting Zhang Han, suddenly a warm voice came from the side. I'm Ziqingshan, Patriarch Zi. On behalf of the Zi family, I'd like to welcome you. Ziqingshan walked up to Zhang Han with a smile, and stretched out both hands. The sweat on his forehead and his dry eyes showed his uneasiness. Even Fang Huan beside him and the several followers behind him, were nervous. There was a sudden silence all around. Everyone was looking at Zhang Han. Xian, acting as a clever wife, pursed her lips and said nothing. Meng Meng turned her gaze at Zhang Han, and began to think, are they my grandparents? Why hasn't Mama introduced me to them? Don't they like Meng Meng? They said they would buy chips, shrimp chips, chicken flavor circles and seaweed for Meng Meng. Ziqingshan kept stretching out his hands. 1 second, 2 seconds, until 5 seconds passed. Zhang Han did not move. Taking a glance at Ziqingshan and his followers, Zhang Han turned his gaze to Ziqiang and Xu Xianyu sitting in the last row, and walked towards them. Overt contempt. Kaboom! Ziqingshan seemed to have been struck by lightning, becoming stiff and motionless. His outstretched hands were still hanging in midair, and he seemed to grow old at this moment. Fang Huan's face was flushed and she was astonished. Su Long, He Chen and all the others looked at them contemptuously. You asked for it. Since you were not nice to them, do you want them to be nice to you? The strict system of the Zi family were known by all the people present. Although the rules improved the overall strength of the Zi family, it was more and more like a hierarchical company, rather than a family. They did not pay any attention to Ziqingshan and his followers, who were standing still. Instead, they followed Zhang Han to the last row, and stood by, to look at him without taking their seats. In fact, Su Long, Secretary Yuan, the present Grand Masters and the high-ranking celebrities were all curious to see Zhang Han for the first time. Though they had already learned about Zhang Han's character from He Chen or Liang Hao and his sister, the shock it brought was far less than that of what they witnessed today. According to the first impression, Zhang Han was very easygoing, as if nothing could affect his mood. He was like an ordinary person, but they all knew that under his peaceful appearance, there was a great power hidden. Almost all of them had heard of the title of Fierce Zhang. I can't imagine that he was a late-stage Grand Master. How old is he? What a promising young man. Su Long stared at Zhang Han seriously, as the excellent man reminded him of Su Mu, the talent of the Su family who was now cultivating indoors. I thought Su Mu's talent was amazing, but there are also people who are even greater. Su Long sighed with emotion. Although some people were geniuses, their talents were not enough to dominate an era. However, the Hua nation was rich in land and people, and Emperor King in the north and Zhang Han Yang in the south were both that kind of leader of the times. How amazing it was! When he was sighing, Zhang Han and his family approached Ziqiang and his wife. Ziqiang looked at Zhang Han in front of him, as well as the several people with extraordinary momentum behind Zhang Han. At the same time, he quietly glanced at the celebrities standing around him. Gulp! The sound of someone swallowing hard could be heard. Ziqiang felt embarrassed. He was in a dilemma. In any other family, it's the son-in-law who should be nervous at this time. How can I be so nervous now? Alas! These great men are standing here like stakes. How can I relax? Just when Ziqiang was thinking, Zhang Han was also pondering, and his mind was not as calm as his expression. He was hesitating slightly. It was the first time for him to come to propose marriage. Well, Zhang Han glanced at Ziqiang and Xuanhuan. Thinking for a while, he took out a palm-sized glass bottle from his pocket, which contained a medicinal pellet surrounded by a light mist. Nice to meet you, father-in-law. Zhang Han is saluting you. This is a small gift and I hope my father-in-law will like it. After that, Zhang Han loosened Meng Meng's palm, held the bottle in his hands, and bent to give it to Ziqiang. Zhang Han's attitude and action made Su Long's eyes squint slightly. He's so powerful, but still free from arrogance and impetuosity. What a man with boldness of vision. All the other martial arts grandmasters here were also relieved. Ziqiang was stunned. What's this? Is this a particularly expensive medicinal pellet? Ahem. Ziqiang coughed to cover up his confusion. After looking around, he stood up and reached out his hands to take the pill bottle. He didn't know what to say, so he nodded and repeated, well, good. After Ziqiang received the bottle, Zhang Han nodded with a smile, and then took out another bottle of pill from his pocket. There was a little more cyan color in the pill. Nice to meet you, mother-in-law. Zhang Han said this again, and handed over the bottle of pills. Nice to meet you, Han, you are more handsome than your picture. Xuanhuan took the pill with a smile, looked into the bottle, and asked curiously, what is this? I made the 2 elixirs for you to help improve your physique, and I specially added some materials to the elixir of my mother-in-law to make your skin better. Zhang Han smiled. It's so nice, thank you, Han, you are so considerate. Xuanhuan replied in surprise. Ziqiang did not know the value of the pill, but he looked around and found that all the great men standing beside him were looking enviously at the bottle in his hand. Because when Zhang Han took out the elixir, Su Long was shocked and told the people around him in a low voice, heaven-grade medicinal pellet. Everyone's face slightly changed, and they couldn't help murmuring to themselves. How generous Master Zhang is. Wait. He made the pills himself? He knows alchemy? The way they looked at Zhang Han changed again, according to their moods. When Ziqiang saw their expressions, he knew that the pills must be of high value. According to the tradition, after Zhang Han's salute and Xian's parents' acceptance of the gift, Zhang Han was now officially recognized by them as their son-in-law. Xin opened her mouth at this time. Her voice was sweet and she said softly, Dad, Mom. Yes. Her parents responded and seemed on the verge of tears. Yan is going to marry someone in a flash. Xuanhuan covered her mouth, and could not control her emotions. My sister-in-law, it's a happy thing to get married. Dongling said with a smile. Yes. Xuanhuan adjusted her mood in a hurry. Seeing this scene, Xian was about to cry, too. She felt her father's mood change. He no longer cared about the rules, but more about his daughter. There was a tinge of sadness in the air. Everyone around was silent. Many people, including those in the square, were looking at this side. In fact, Zhang Han did not know what to do in the face of this situation. Fortunately, there was a little princess who was good at regulating the atmosphere. Mama, Papa, why don't you introduce Meng Meng to them? Meng Meng raised her head and mumbled, although they have finished speaking. Meng Meng hasn't had a chance to talk yet. Did they forget about Meng Meng? Hearing the little girl's words, Ziqiang, Xuanhuan and all the others looked at her. There was a big smile on their faces. PFFT. A laugh burst through Xian's lips the moment she heard Meng Meng's voice. Meng Meng, say hello to your grandparents. Xian said. Okay. Meng Meng let go of her mother's hand and made a heart-shaped gesture with her small hands, saying, hello, Grandpa and Grandma. Meng Meng want to give you a heart. Ha ha ha. Ziqiang cheered up instantly and began laughing happily. He quickly took out a big red envelope from his pocket and handed it to Meng Meng, saying, my dear granddaughter, this is for you, take it. Huh? Meng Meng was confused. Where are the chips, shrimp chips, seaweed and biscuits? Meng Meng looked up at Zhang Han and Xian. Take it. Zhang Han smiled and touched Meng Meng's head. Thank you, Grandpa and Grandma. What's in it? Meng Meng took the envelope and asked. This was the first time Meng Meng had received a red envelope from her elders. It's Grandpa's lucky money for Meng Meng. Xian replied with a smile. Money? Meng Meng again looked at the envelope and gave it to Zhang Han happily. Papa, Papa. Meng Meng also has money, let's deposit it in the bank. Her innocent words gave rise to bursts of laughter. It's just for Meng Meng's good luck. Zhang Han smiled and gave the envelope back to Meng Meng. Ha ha ha. Ziqiang stretched out his arms to Meng Meng and laughed. Granddaughter, come on. Give Grandpa a hug. I can't. Papa said that in addition to Papa and Mama, no one else can hug or even kiss me. Meng Meng refused seriously. Ziqiang's expression froze. He slowly turned his head to look at Zhang Han, and his mouth was twitching. What do you mean? Do you still want to marry my daughter? Well, Zhang Han's lips were also twitching. Looking at Xian, who was giggling, he said, of course grandparents can do this. Meng Meng, give them a hug. Well, hug me, Grandpa. Meng Meng stretched out her arms to Ziqiang. My dearest granddaughter. Ziqiang laughed again and happily held Meng Meng in his arms. My granddaughter is so lovely and beautiful. He could not help praising Meng Meng. Ziqiang started to praise his granddaughter effusively, leaving everyone around speechless. Why are you still showing off? But, it's really worth showing off such a son-in-law. Daughter and Granddaughter. Chapter 435, The New Patriarch. Meng Meng seemed to have a kind of charm that made people feel happy. Ziqiang and Xuanhuan's moods were quickly changing for the better, and even the depression caused by Fang Huan's scolding completely disappeared. It seemed that Meng Meng had become the center of the world, attracting everyone's attention. Out of love for Meng Meng, Ziqiang's attitude towards Zhang Han had improved. Xuanhuan looked at Zhang Han carefully, and became increasingly satisfied with her son-in-law. Han is really a talent. Come on and sit down. Xuanhuan, holding Xian in one hand and Zhang Han in the other, asked them to sit beside her. Then she looked at Su Long and the others, and said with a smile, please sit down, gentlemen. I don't deserve it. Many people shook their heads and sat down beside them. At this time, Ziqiang and Fang Huan returned to the main seats, both with pale faces. The series of events that happened made people in the square dumbfounded. Xian is back, with her husband and her daughter. But her husband's identity was like the sun in the sky. It was so high that no one could breathe. When facing him, each part of him, in their eyes, was like an insurmountable mountain. Looking at Ziqingshan and Fang Huan's expressions, everyone understood that the Zi family had been following extremely strict rules for years. Today, Mr. Zhang crushed all these rules without any hesitation. No, before he came, his identity had already broken those rules. The meaning of this could only be imagined. At this moment, there was only one sentence looping in everyone's mind. Ziqiang and his family are bound to rise very quickly. Ziyu, who sat on the side of the main seat and never spoke, also made it clear at this time. Looking at Ziqingshan and Fang Huan's face, he knew that their family had lost their dignity at the party today. In order to protect his father's last dignity as a patriarch, he chose to stand up and look at Zhang Han, saying in a loud voice, "We welcome Mr. Zhang and your proposal of marriage, but I hope Mr. Zhang knows that you are in the Zi family, and the leader and representative of the family is still sitting here. According to the rules, Mr. Zhang must first obtain the consent of Ziyan's parents, and then," when he spoke, the eyes of many people on the scene also turned to him. Su Long and his friends frowned slightly. "Isn't that a provocation when you say that at this time?" Ziqingshan and Fang Huan, as well as their followers, looked at Ziyu, and wanted to say something, but finally all that they wanted to express, turned into a sigh. There was bitterness on his face. At this point, it was no use saying more. Since he wants to say something, just let him do so. And what he quoted is indeed in the Zi family rules. However, before he had finished speaking, Zhang Han gave him an indifferent look. Zhang Han seemed to be looking at a stranger, and his expression was colder than before. Before Ziyu finished, he interrupted. "Can you represent the Zi family?" Zhang Han's tone was flat and his voice was not loud, but everyone present could hear him clearly. It also made Ziyu quiet, although his expression showed that he was struggling. He wanted to say, "I can," but what he was used to saying often, now seemed to choke him. He was under too much pressure. "If you can represent the Zi family, I will go to another place to propose to my father-in-law and mother-in-law," Zhang Han said calmly. Although his words were not severe, they made all the Ziz afraid, because the implication of these words was too complicated. After hearing the words, the members of the Fan family and the Liang family at the back became angry and sneered at Zihan. "If Mr. Zhang agrees, the Fan family can arrange a place. We have not had a celebration in the Liang's house for a long time. He Banqing can also arrange an excellent place for Mr. Zhang." Every time Ziqingshan heard a person's invitation to Zhang Han, his face turned paler than before. At the end, all of his followers looked ghastly pale. "Now, I want to know, can you represent the Zi family?" Zhang Han looked at Ziqingshan, and said calmly. As soon as he said that, everyone present was shocked. In particular, all the people in the lower square gathered at the edge of the platform, and observed the situation carefully. Hearing this, many young people in the Zi family trembled with excitement. "He is so powerful. Mr. Zhang is so powerful that even the patriarch dared not say anything." Zifeng, standing in front of the crowd, was the most excited and he was silently shouting, "The rules have been overridden. They are finally broken." Though these kind of strict rules and regulations seemed to improve the Zi family a lot, they were actually like a millstone around everyone's neck. Zifeng believed that he should be given a larger stage, and so did all the members of the Ziz, but all their hopes were dashed by the harsh family rules. What happened today gave him new hope, and made him feel excited. Facing Zhang Han's question, Ziyu was speechless, and he also realized that if he dared to say anything more, Ziqiang's family would be separated from the Zi clan. He could not make himself a sinner of the Zi family, which was also understood by Ziqingshan, Fang Huan and others. This sort of statement, no one could afford that. They really do not represent the Zi family. Just then, an old voice came from behind. When they looked around, they saw Zijiang Shan, a legendary figure of the Zi family, walking slowly towards the crowd, with a mahogany crutch in the shape of a dragon head in his right hand. Next to him were two aged men, Zilong and Zihu. The two early-stage martial arts master were the last cards of the Zi family. They had been cultivating in a yard at the elders' main residence, and were rarely seen by others. Accompanying the three were elders, Fan Qingfing and Liang Li. The presence of the elders made many people in the Zi family stand up. Zi Qingshan and Fang Huan hurried out to help elders, but Zi Jiangshan waved them away and refused their help. Looking at Zi Qingshan in disappointment, Zi Jiangshan shook his head, left Zi Qingshan and walked to Zi Qing's side. Boom! Zi Qingshan nearly fell, and his face turned even paler than before. Fang Huan beside him, as well as the core members of his faction, were also overcome by despair. There was only one sentence in their minds. It is over. Nice to meet you, Grandmaster Zhang. We are Zilong and Zihu of the Zi family. When they came near, they first made a respectful gesture to Zhang Han. Don't be so courteous. Zhang Han stopped them, and then turned to look at Zi Jiangshan calmly. Ziqiang, Xixiniu and others hurriedly stood up and welcomed Zi Jiangshan and his companions, and asked them to sit down. During this period, Ziyan pursed her lips, blinked, and looked at Zhang Han with pride. My husband is so powerful. After Zi Jiangshan sat down, he happened to be seated beside Zhang Han. He looked at Zhang Han calmly, then at Meng Meng who climbed into Zhang Han's arms. He said with a smile, "Little girl, why are you so beautiful?" Meng Meng was surprised at his words, and then buried her head into Zhang Han's arms. My mama is much more beautiful, and my papa is quite handsome. Zi Jiangshan shook his head with a smile, reached into his pocket with his right hand, took out an old-fashioned candy, and handed it to Meng Meng. Here is a candy for you. Meng Meng took a glance at Ziyan. After she nodded, the little girl happily took the candy and said, "Thank you, Grandpa." Ha 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 ha. Zi Jiangshan laughed happily. Seeing this, Ziqiang almost laughed. Looking at Meng Meng's expression, he knew that the girl was happier to get this candy than his red envelope. Yan has grown up too, Zi Jiangshan said with a smile. I still remember when you were a child. Time flies fast, and you have a capable husband. It's very good. In the end, Zi Jiangshan was looking at Zhang Han. He was not only praising Ziyan, but also praising Zhang Han's outstanding performance. After that, Zi Jiangshan turned his head, slowly stood up, supported by crutches, and walked forward a few steps. He looked around the platform and the people in the square, and announced in a loud voice, "Family harmony is the basis for success in any undertaking. Before I retired, I once said that the former patriarch should act in accordance with the rules and regulations, and I hoped that the Zi family could still remain the same. Compared with him, Zi Qingshan has more ambitions, but I remember that when he took over the family, I also said family harmony is the basis for success in any undertaking." Zi Jiangshan's words made Zi Qingshan, Fang Huan and others lower their heads instantly. A few years ago, I occasionally paid attention to the development of the Zi family, and I also heard about the increasingly strict rules, but I did not intervene, because the Zi family did make progress under such rules. After I die, I would not be ashamed to face the ancestors. Now, I've heard about what happened in the past 2 years and today, I have mixed feelings. I won't say any more. I will announce my decision directly. All the expressions on the faces of the members of Zi Qingshan's faction changed immediately. It was obvious that Zi Jiangshan might announce that Ziqiang would be the new patriarch next. Although the rules set by their faction were very strict, they made the family progress, which was their contribution to the family. Why were they regarded as sinners now? They turned to Zi Qingshan, but found that he had already calmed down. Instead of feeling angry or resentful because he had lost the position as the head of the family, he just sat there quietly. At this time, all the Zi family and other family members, no matter on the platform or in the square, focused their attention on Zi Jiangshan. When they were guessing, Zi Jiangshan announced, "I declare that Ziqiang will be the new patriarch of the Zi family." After that, Zhang slowly walked back to the chair and sat down. The silence in the square lasted for 10 seconds, and then, there was an uproar. The change in the Zi family leadership was a big event. Patriarch Liang, Patriarch Fan and Secretary Yuan, who were sitting at the back, shook their heads slightly. If Zhang was 10 years younger, they would regard him as a cunning old man. But at this time, they all knew that Zhang was making arrangements for the affairs. After his death, Zhang was a legend of Singapore's business community, and even Secretary Yuan and Su Long admired him. One reason was that while Zhang was still in power, he donated nearly 10 billion yuan. The second reason was that 5 years ago, a heaven-grade medicinal pellet appeared at an auction in the martial arts world, that could prolong people's life. Though the Zi family had the means to bid for it, Zhang shook his head and gave up, saying optimistically that death was a natural law. 1 year ago, as he became older, another medicinal pellet with the same function appeared, but he still did not bid for it. His view of life and death was admirable, so everyone could understand and support the decision he made today. With Zhang Han and Zhang Han's father-in-law, their Zi family would rise and thrive for 100 years. Ziqiang, go and say something. Zhang waved at Ziqiang with a smile. Ah, this is... Ziqiang was already confused, and did not know what he was going to do. Patriarch, I never expected this position. Why am I the patriarch? My son-in-law is too powerful, right? He helped me become the patriarch. Let me say something. What should I say? While Ziqiang's mind was still in a whirl, Xixiniu did not know what to say, either. Zhang Han looked at Ziqiang and encouraged him with a smile. My father-in-law, just follow your heart. Take the position if you want to be a patriarch, or give it up if you don't want it. Ziqiang was enlightened and he nodded at Zhang Han. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The crowd gradually quieted down. They knew that when Ziqiang opened his eyes, he would have come to a decision. All of them held their breath. 1 second, 2 seconds. 1 minute passed. Ziqiang exhaled deeply and opened his eyes. His expression was peaceful. He smiled, stood up and walked to the center of the platform, made an obeisance and said in a loud voice, "Thanks for your support. From now on, I will lead the Zi family and do my best to make it stronger." When he finished speaking, many people around him took the lead and clapping. Gradually, everyone began applauding and cheering. In any case, Ziqiang was now the new leader of the Zi family, and with that man's support, his position must be unshakable, so he certainly deserved everyone's congratulations. At the same time, many people were still in shock. They didn't expect to come to the party today, and witness the birth of the new Zi family leader. It was amazing. Amid the thunderous applause, Ziqiang looked at the lonely man in the central seat. He raised his hand and let the applause subside. He cleared his throat and said in a loud voice, "Now I want to announce my first order. Ziqiang will be the deputy patriarch of the Zi family." While talking, he looked at Ziqiang, held out his right hand and said, "Brother, would you like to join hands with me to lead the Zi family to prosperity?" Kaboom! Ziqiang seemed to be hit by lightning and was at a loss. Xuanhuan was also confused. Instead of being happy with the news, she looked at Ziqiang in a daze, and felt as if her heart was broken, which was her worldview. Many people were stunned. These included lots of celebrities in high positions. In the back row, Patriarch Liang looked at Ziqiang admiringly, and said slowly in a low voice, "It reminds me of what a great man once said, forgive yourself, forgive those who have hurt you, make people admire you for your virtue, and only then will you become an outstanding leader." Brother Ziqiang is not an ordinary person, and I didn't expect him to be so generous. The Zi family is really going to rise. Patriarch Fan kept shaking his head. Many people were surprised, including Zhang, who was stunned at first, and then smiled with relief. Even Zhang Han felt a little surprised, for he didn't expect that his father-in-law had such virtues, which meant Ziqiang was really suitable to be a patriarch. He had met lots of patriarchs of like Ziqiang in the Cultivation World, so he knew that it was better to make others admire you for your virtues, than to use force to suppress others. Gradually, there was silence on the platform, and many people were looking at Ziqingshan. In a daze, he stood up and walked slowly to Ziqiang, after being reminded by the aged man beside him. Then he held Ziqiang tightly with his trembling right hand, and then covered his face with his left hand and cried. He had thousands of words to say, but did not know how to express them, as he was now filled with guilt and admiration for Ziqiang. Ziqiang smiled and patted Ziqingshan's arm. Xuanhuan, who was sitting at the back, stood up and walked to Ziqiang. She bowed deeply, and with reddened eyes, said in a trembling voice, "I'm sorry." Then she turned and bowed to the platform, "I'm sorry." Again she turned and bowed to the square, "I'm sorry. I've done a lot of heartless things over the years and I apologize for my faults to you. I will never be involved in family affairs in the future." The words of Ziqingshan and Xuanhuan put the Zi family in a complicated mood. Now I want to state the second point. Ziqiang smiled and said in a loud voice, "I announce that the family rules and regulations are abolished so that people with abilities can get their due status. No matter if you are of the direct line of descent or not, young or old, as long as you have the ability, the family will cultivate you." Great. In an instant, in the square, many members of the Zi family began cheering, especially Zifeng, who was shouting and crying excitedly. He has been suppressed for a long time, and today, he finally regained some hope. Third, the younger generation of the Zi family. Ziqiang smiled playfully and said in a loud voice, "You can love anyone freely." Wow! If they had been indoors, the shouts could even bring down the roof. A young girl from the Zi family looked at a man a few meters away, and then she rushed over to hug and kiss him. But because they were close to the platform. "Huh? Wow, Papa, Mama, look at them, they are kissing, just like you." Meng pointed to the front and said, "Swish, swish, swish." A lot of people started laughing and looking at them. Ziyan's expression froze, and her face was flushed. Well, children are not allowed to see this. Zhang Han coughed softly, and reached out his hand to block Meng's sight. To the cheers of the crowd, Ziqiang took Ziqingshan and Xuanhuan back to the central position, where all the members of Ziqingshan's faction stood up to bow at Ziqiang respectfully and said, "Patriarch." Ziqiang smiled and nodded, and then went back to the right side, during which time he exhaled a long breath. He had once hesitated whether he wanted to be the head of the family, and whether he wanted to exile Ziqingshan and his followers. Did he want to get back at them? Maybe. He had also thought about what the Zi family will be like under his leadership. However hesitant he was, he had never had this experience before, and could not get any help. But Zhang Han told him to follow his heart, so he decided to deal with it according to his original intention and wish. It turned out that he also felt happy. When he went back, Ziqingshan and his followers looked at each other and stood up, one by one. Then Ziqingshan left his seat for Ziqiang and stood behind the new patriarch, along with others. Their seats had originally been arranged by their strength and faction, but now they were all gathered together. Ziqiang smiled and patted Zhang Han on the shoulder. He was getting more and more satisfied with his son-in-law. "Sir?" Zhang Han chuckled, took out a bottle out of his pocket and handed it to Ziqingshan. "This is my betrothal present, eat it and you'll live 10 more years. Hearing this, the martial artists present began to envy the Zi family again. A capable alchemist in the home was equal to a moving treasure chest. This time, Ziqingshan did not refuse the gift. He took the bottle and smiled. "Thank you." "Well, you're welcome." Seeing all the adults' admiration for Papa, Meng waved at them and said proudly. Her reaction provoked laughter from the crowd. "Well, Han, I haven't had time to ask who are your parents. You should get married as soon as possible since Meng is growing up so quickly." Ziqiang looked at Wang Zanzong and the others following Zhang Han, and asked with a smile, "Brother, nice to meet you. I'm Rong Jiaxin, Zhang Han's aunt, and this is Wang Ming, my husband." Rong Jiaxin smiled as she greeted Ziqiang. Nice to meet you. Wang Ming took the lead and introduced himself. We are from the Wang family in Xihang. This is my father, Wang Zhanzong, and this is... They began greeting each other harmoniously. When he was being introduced to Wang Zanping and the other elders, Zhijiangshan stood up politely, and greeted them one by one. After they sat back, they almost knew the background of everyone and how they were related to each other. Looking at Rong Jiaxin, Ziqiang suggested, Sister, in my opinion, we'd better let them skip the engagement, and get married as soon as possible. Chapter 436, Let's choose an auspicious day. Swish. Hearing that, Xian flushed and her long lashes began fluttering with her beautiful eyes. Rolling her eyes at Ziqiang, she complained shyly, Dad, why are you in such a hurry to marry your daughter to another man? Of course, I'm in a hurry. My granddaughter is already growing up. Ziqiang narrowed his eyes and stared at Zhang Han. He was eager to ask, You've taken my daughter away for so long, why didn't you come to propose until now? I haven't seen this kind of doing first and reporting afterwards. Do you know the other young men would tell their parents right after the girls are pregnant? However, he remembered all of Zhang Han's identities and knew he could not say that on this occasion. Opening his mouth and then closing it, Ziqiang turned to look at Meng Meng and said with a smile, Come on, my granddaughter, give Grandpa a hug. No. Meng Meng tightened her little arms around his father's waist in Zhang Han's arms and shook her head. Ziqiang's smile froze and then he looked at Zhang Han helplessly. I want to hug my granddaughter, you take care of it. Well, Meng Meng, let Grandpa hug you. Zhang Han whispered to Meng Meng. No way. Meng Meng pouted. It seemed that the little girl had a problem with her grandpa. Ziqiang hurriedly bowed his head beside Meng Meng's face and asked with a smile, What's the matter, Meng Meng? Don't you like Grandpa? I don't like you. Ziqiang was depressed and asked in confusion, Why? Grandpa promised to prepare chips, biscuits, seaweed, chicken flavor circle for Meng Meng. It's almost noon now and there's nothing for Meng Meng. Grandpa lied, and Meng Meng dislikes liars. Even the old gentleman just now gave Meng Meng a candy, but Grandpa gave Meng Meng nothing. Meng Meng said seriously. Everyone surrounding them was amused, and burst out laughing. Ziqiang's mouth began to twitch. Well, is that candy better than my big red envelope? Of course Grandpa will keep to his promise. I've prepared lots of things for Meng Meng. Well, can someone help me? Ziqiang swept across the young generation of Zi family and finally fixed his eyes on a young man. Go and fetch some snacks from the hall of my house. After that, he gave Meng Meng a smile. It's true, Grandpa won't lie to you. Something delicious will soon arrive. Really? The little girl's eyes lit up. Looking at Zhang Han, she stretched out her little arms towards Ziqiang and said reluctantly, Grandpa, give me a hug. Wow, my dearest granddaughter. Ziqiang burst laughing and gave Meng Meng a big hug. Then he looked at Rong Jiaxin delightedly, Sister, what do you think about my suggestion? Let's choose a wedding day and invite Han's parents here. Let them get married. Actually, I've been thinking about it. After all, Meng Meng is 4 years old, but... Rong Jiaxin looked at Zhang Han hesitantly, and soon realized it was not the time to talk about marriage when she saw Zhang Han's calm expression. Therefore, she shook her head and replied, It is not convenient for Han's parents now, and Han wants to get married after they come back. Maybe we should wait for 1 year. 1 year? Ziqiang was confused and asked, Why can't they come back soon? Their children are going to get married. No matter what they are busy with, they can definitely make time for the wedding. He was a little worried. Don't his parents agree with the marriage? Disagree? My Yan is so beautiful, and she gave birth to such a lovely child. How can they disagree? I'm Yan's father, and I should be the first to disagree. Thinking about it, Ziqiang was a little dissatisfied. Although Zhang Han was very powerful, his daughter was also the most beautiful princess of the Zi family. Ziqiang, Zixiniu and Zipeng were quiet. Knowing what they were thinking about, Zhang Han smiled and explained. Father and mother-in-law, my parents are missing. According to the information I received, they are in a mysterious place, which can't be accessed now. Within half a year or so, I will bring them back, and I hope to marry Xian then. I think the wedding will be incomplete without my parents, so I hope my father-in-law and mother-in-law can understand and forgive me. His words surprised many people present. A mysterious place. Sulong's eyes squinted slightly. Is it the Worldlet in Hua Nation? Worldlet was a stable subsidiary space. Thought there were many kinds of worldlets. Only a few of them could be named and defined as a realm, and they were all the residences of cultivators with abundant resources and rich spiritual chi suitable for cultivating. When Sulong was young, he had heard from his elders that for thousands of years, stable small worldlets had been found everywhere, but the total number were small. The unstable small worldlet was very dangerous, and no one knew what creatures lived in it. The small worldlet was just like a vast ocean, while the discovery made by human beings was only the tip of the iceberg. In addition, after many unstable small worldlets changed, they may have appeared in the world within a period of time. Such places were known as ancient ruins. Therefore he knew that what Grandmaster Zhang mentioned as the mysterious place was definitely a worldlet. Although Ziqiang and Xuanhuan did not understand this, they were surprised after hearing Zhang Han's explanation. I see. Xuanhuan shook her head slightly and said, let's go with Han's idea. Okay, let's wait for Han's parents to come back to discuss the marriage. But Ziqiang looked at Zhang Han, Xian and Meng in his arms. Get the marriage license first, or it will be inconvenient for you to do many things such as applying for schools for Meng. Yes, I think so too. We'll get engaged here first, and then we'll get a marriage license when we get back to Hong Kong. Zhang Han took a look at Xian, who looked cute, and said with a smile, that's good, ha. I'm very happy to be a grandfather, but you should remember that although you are very powerful, if my daughter is wronged, I will take her back. Ziqiang said seriously. I won't give my father-in-law this chance. It's Zhang Han's pleasure to own Xian and this family, and I will certainly live up to her in my life. Zhang Han looked at Xian gently and said. Zhang Han's words made Xian feel happy in an instant. It was nice to be spoiled and loved. Don't worry, Uncle Ziqiang, our boss is very kind to Sister Xian. Liang Mengkai chuckled. Yes, Papa loves Mama and me so much. Whatever I want to eat, Papa will make it for me, and he often buy me chips and seaweed. Meng looked up at Ziqiang and said this again, obviously reminding him. Ziqiang kept looking back. A few seconds later, when he saw the young man running in hurriedly, his eyes lit up. The snacks are coming, Ziqiang said. Look, Meng, these are all the snacks Grandpa prepared for you. Come here. Hearing Ziqiang's urging, the young man accelerated, and soon ran to Ziqiang, breathlessly, and handed over the food bag. Meng, look, I did not cheat you, did I? Ziqiang put a big bag of snacks in front of Meng. Oh, so many. Meng was very excited and said happily, Grandpa is so nice, thank you. Ha, enjoy them. Ziqiang laughed. So the little girl sat on Ziqiang's lap and ate the snacks happily. Han, where is your hometown? Xuanhuan looked at Zhang Han, and asked with a smile. I was born in Shangjing and used to be a member of the Zhang family. My father's name is Zhang Guangyu and my mother's name is Rong Jiali. Zhang Han looked at Xuanhuan and replied. Hearing what Zhang Han said, many people began to think whether they had heard the names before. Almost all those who came from famous families knew about the Zhang family in Shangjing, which was the top-ranking family and was much larger and greater than the Zi family, but they did not know which Zhang family Zhang Han referred to, since there were too many families surnamed Zhang, Wang, Li all you in Shangjing. But Zhang Han mentioned it as the Zhang family in Shangjiang, which meant it was indeed the top-ranking Zhang family. Besides, Zhang Han's expression confirmed their conjecture. Zhang Guanyu, Zhang Guanyu. Su Long repeated the name several times, and suddenly, he was stunned. Looking at Zhang Han, he asked, "Is your father Zhang Guanyu, the Lord of Battle?" "Your father is the Lord of Battle, Zhang Guanyu? The big hero? Wow, a tiger father will not beget a dog son." He Chen could not help taking in a deep breath. In the era of the Lord of Battle, the Grand Master could not appear in the world for various reasons, and there was no one who could suppress Zhang Guanyu in Huan Nation. Therefore, Zhang Guanyu had won hundreds of battles, and was well known for his being invincible under the Grand Master. Unfortunately, Zhang Guanyu was later badly injured by North Tiger Gaik Kong. Years after that, it was the North Tiger era, until he was defeated by Emperor King, who suppressed all the talents in Huan Nation for many years, and became the most dazzling talent, until Zhang Han Yang appeared. Su Long looked at Zhang Han meaningfully and murmured to himself, "I'm afraid there will be a battle between Emperor King and Fierce Zhang. It will be a good fight to watch." Hearing the Grand Master's comments, Ziqiang and Zixiniu looked at each other. His parents have powerful connections, too. Zhejiang Shan kept smiling and did not join in the discussion. Instead, he kept looking around while enjoying the joy brought by Zhang Han's arrival. Every time he focused on the young generation cheering in the ground, he would sigh with emotion that sometimes unity was the symbol of family prosperity, and there was no need to worry about this with Ziqiang in charge of family affairs and Ziqingshan's assistance. The Zi family had found the most ideal way for its own development. At the back, Liu Qingfeng, who did not get much attention, was a bit confused at this time. "Zhang Guanyu is Mr. Zhang's father. I've been wondering why he is willing to give me the opportunity to cooperate." It turns out that he had a good relationship with Zhang Guanyu, and had met Zhang Han and Zhang Li during their childhood. However, they were young at that time, so he did not recognize them when they were grown. At this time, he was very moved to hear the news. "That naughty boy has grown up, and now I need to look up to him." As in the Chenjiang River the waves behind drive on those ahead, so each new generation excels the last one. Ziqiang observed everything quietly for a long time, and learned that Zhang Han was not only powerful, but also had a strong background. This made him happier, because all parents wanted their daughter to marry an outstanding man, and more important, an outstanding man who was good to his wife. Qiqiang was very satisfied and felt that Zhang Han was becoming more and more agreeable. What a handsome young man he was. Ha ha ha, okay, then the wedding will be held after you get your parents back. First get engaged and then get the license. This. Sister, shall we discuss the date of engagement? Now that everyone is here, shall we make a decision directly? Ziqiang asked Rong Jiaxin. He knew that Rong Jiaxin was Zhang Han's immediate elder, and the members of the Wang family came with her. Okay, let's fix the date. I don't understand the customs here, so it's up to you to decide. Rong Jiaxin replied with a smile. Okay. Ziqiang nodded, pondered, looked at Zhejiang Shan and said, Uncle, how about you picking the date? Zhejiang Shan was surprised, and then replied slowly with a smile. Let me see the calendar. Ziqiang quickly took out his mobile phone and opened the perpetual calendar. Zhejiang Shan took over the cell phone, looked at it for a while, and then nodded, October 19th. Great. Ziqiang nodded, stood up, looked around, and said in a loud voice, Ziyan and Zhang Han's engagement date will be on October 19th, please come to the engagement party. Wow. Oh. Great. The young people of the Zi family cheered happily. Although they did not know Zhang Han and had not seen Ziyan for several years, they knew that the rules of the Zi family had been abolished, and they could love freely. These changes were brought about by that man, which made them admire him sincerely. Zifeng, in particular, was no longer serious at this time. He tore off his suit tie and raised his hands to shout. Meng Meng put down her snacks for a while, looked around with bright eyes, and finally raised her little hand and cheered. Great, Papa and Mama are going to be engaged. Meng Meng can pose for photos with flowers. Hearing the voice of the little girl, everyone on the scene could not help laughing. By the time her parents get engaged, the girl will be grown up and will be able to attend the ceremony in person. It's really interesting. Seeing this, Ziqingshan smiled and shook his head again. Chapter 437, A Busy Reunion in the Zi clan. After they settled the business, the atmosphere was lightened. Zixini U, Dongling, Rongjiaxin, Zhan, Wang Ya, Liang Menkai, Zishiya, and others were chatting aside. Ziqiang was the only one who focused on playing with Meng Meng. Zijiangshan didn't go back either, he stayed to talk with some old friends. He Chen and others moved their chairs and sat closer to Zhang Han. Fan Kengfing stared at Zhang Han and asked curiously, Grandmaster Zhang, I heard that you went to Xiang before and had a fight with Xiang Kishan? Old Fan, that was hardly a fight. Wang Ming had mentioned Zhang Han to others before. Even if grandmasters were different in stages, no one would underestimate a Wudao grandmaster. Wang Ming was Zhang Han's senior, so everyone had gotten acquainted with one another before long. Hearing what Zhang Han said, people all turned to look at Wang Ming, who slightly raised his chin and spoke with pride. A fight needs two sides to be evenly matched in strength, but it barely happened as Han only needed one move to beat Xiang Kishan. His array was incredible, and it was like an unprecedented monster. Hiss. He Chen and others couldn't help but take a deep breath at what he said. Zhang Han was strong enough. Even his array was supreme. They could only think of two words. How incredible. Some people were born extraordinary. In the case of martial artists, talents could break through all the way to the top, but others weren't even eligible to be martial artists throughout their lives. People were allowed to study martial arts in this ending era, it was just that the essential prerequisite for them was high. Seeing their expressions, Zhang Han smiled and said nothing. Talent? Zhang Han didn't take himself as a talent. Everything, what he had earned, had its cost. He was the only one who knew the hardships. If one wished to stand out among others, they must work hard to make their way. Zhang Han thought the proverb had its sense. He Chen stared at Wang Ming and asked, then, is Master Zhang also an alchemist? His array was powerful enough. What if he also excelled in alchemy? There was no way he could be that good. Wang Ming didn't respond immediately. He glanced at Zhang Han, and then said, about alchemy, I have seen Han do it once. So far, it's still in the research phase, and it's just another hobby for him. There was an old saying that one shouldn't show off their wealth. Wang Ming thought one person shouldn't show off their strength either, thus, he answered in that way. Zhang Han shook his head with a smile. A martial artist usually didn't show his hand unless it was final. As for Zhang Han, no one knew how many cards he held in his hand. Every time there was a critical moment, he would always find a way to save the situation. He Chen and others were relieved when they heard the words. If Zhang Han was indeed that perfect, it would make them feel stressed. Nevertheless, they all looked at Zhang Han in surprise. Su Long, in particular, as a leader of spirit group, wished that he could have 2 or 3 talents as subordinates. There were some good young men under him, but they were nowhere near Zhang Han. While everyone was chatting for a while, Xian looked at Meng Meng and coughed softly. She said, Meng Meng, you have eaten more than 1 packet, eh? Meng Meng blinked her big eyes, looking innocent, and she put a few chicken-flavored crisps in her mouth fast. Then she clapped her little hands and said, I will stop eating now. Well, let's put these snacks away first, you can eat them later in the afternoon. Xian placed the snacks in front of Meng Meng to the other side of the chair. Fine, Papa, I'm coming. Meng Meng slid from Ziqiang's legs and slipped into Zhang Han's arms. Once the girl finished eating, she ran away. Ziqiang could do nothing to keep the girl around. His first priority was to get close to Meng Meng. However, in the following conversations with Meng Meng, Ziqiang found that the girl was not very fond of him. He looked at Zhang Han and saw the little girl was clinging to her father. Thus, he said, Han is such a gentleman, so handsome, Papa is super handsome and super powerful. Ziqiang realized now that for Meng, any other words he said were no better than a compliment to Zhang Han. Well, he could really do nothing to change that. Time went by fast, and it was 12 o'clock. Ziqiang approached Ziqiang slowly and leaned forward, saying something. Ziqiang nodded, stood up, and spoke loudly. The restaurant has prepared lunch for us, let's go. The people on the square went to the restaurant first. The people on the platform also stood up one after another. Ziqiang turned around and looked at Secretary Yuan and other major patriarchs. He folded his hands in front and tried to say something. Before he could say anything, Secretary Yuan smiled and came forward. I won't have lunch here, there are still some things I need to take care of when I return. I will be here to congratulate General Zhang's engagement on the 19th, he said. Ah, yes. Ziqiang nodded. Take care. Secretary Yuan nodded to Ziqiang, Zhejiang Shan, and Zhang Han before leaving. We won't take your time and lunch with you, your family must need some privacy, we will meet again on the 19th. Su Long, He Chen, and others all folded their hands and excused themselves. Zhang Han smiled and nodded, seeing them off. Before long, all major figures on the platform left. Others, including those from different factions, looked at Ziqiang and also left one after another. In the end, Liu Qingfeng stood up. He approached Ziqiang and folded his hands. Before he said anything, Ziqiang said with a smile, "It's okay, Chairman Liu, if you have something to deal with, you can leave now, we'll get together on the 19th. Liu Qingfeng was stunned. He thought, I didn't say I was leaving. Liu Qingfeng saw Ziqiang was going to send him away, so he said in a hurry, Brother Ziqiang, I'm not leaving, I need to talk with Zhao Feng later. Ziqiang was a little embarrassed. Okay, let's go to the restaurant, he said. A group of people went to the restaurant. Besides Liu Qingfeng, Liang Menkai, and Liang Hao didn't leave either. Liang Hao walked beside Zhang Li and acted like a gentleman. He introduced Singapore's tourist attractions to Zhang Li, trying to invite her to visit those places. Zhang Li ended the conversation shortly. I have been here. Zhao Feng also acted like a relaxed and casual tourist, walking beside Liang Menkai. He said, Menkai, it's my first time here. Do you want to be a host and take the tour with me? Liang Menkai blinked and asked, don't you have to follow the boss all the time? He doesn't need me around these days, said Zhao Feng with a forced smile. Oh, what did that mean, nothing more? Zhao Feng thought and sighed to himself, his mouth quivered a little. It seemed that she didn't care for boss, then why did she treat me coldly? It was hard to make a woman fall for you. Master excelled at it, he had a baby first, and then he made it. Do I stand a chance to have a romantic encounter with Menkai? Zhao Feng stared at Liang Menkai. Liang Menkai gave him a glare. Liang Menkai didn't know what she wanted, nor knew her feelings for Zhao Feng, either. What she did know was that she had fun when Zhao Feng was frustrated. Walking behind them, Zhif's eyes swept the four people. She curled her lips and thought, what a mess. The Zhiclan's restaurant was huge, and its decoration was quite exquisite. Like Wang's house, it was a one-story building, with an area 3 times that of Wang's restaurant. No one would go there other than twice a month when the Zhiclan had family dinner. The Zhiclan had invited 10 famous chefs to cook for the occasion. When people walked to the restaurant, the food was being served one after another. After everyone arrived at the restaurant, many dishes were already on the table. 90% of the people in the dining room were from the Zhiclan. At first glance, nearly 200 people formed the notable family. However, people from the direct line of descent were a small part. Zhejiang Shan, several senior members in the Zhiclan, Wang Zanzong, Ziqiang's family, and Zhang Han's family were sitting at the same table. According to the tradition, the leader of the family would propose a toast before the meal started. This time Zhejiang Shan was present, so he would be the person who gave the speech. I'm really happy today, And I'm also satisfied. Zhang stood up and looked around. After he said those words, everyone went quiet. He held a small cup of white wine, smiled and spoke again. I am the head of the family. I thought I would make our family more prosperous. It turned out that I only gained more fortune for the family. Wealth can't support a family to go a long way. In fact, as the head of our family, I was concerned. Our family experienced a steady development. Ziqingshan seemed to advance it further. However, Ziklan wasn't in its prime as it did 100 years ago. Now the chance for our family, which I didn't expect, has come. I'd like to propose a toast to Zhang and Zhang Han. You forgot me. Meng mumbled. He mentioned Papa and Mama. How could he forget me? Yeah, and to Meng. Zhang smiled. After that, everyone around raised their glasses and took a sip. Of course, some drank wine, while others beverages. After the toast, everyone started to eat and chat with each other. The scene was very warm. Meng, have some lotus root slices. It's very nutritious. Try this shrimp sauce. While eating, Ziqiang and Xuanhuan put their focus on Meng and kept refilling her bowl. Ziqiang was considerate. Every time Meng looked at him, he would put more food in Zhang Han's plate. He said, Han, try this. You are too graceful. You need to have more food to get enough nutrition. However, the movement of his chopsticks and his conversation with Zhang Han made people want to laugh, because during which he kept checking Meng's face. In order to please Meng, the grandpa was making great effort. Zhang didn't say much today, but the smile on her face never stopped. Seeing this, Zhang Han felt delighted too. Whatever it took to make Zhang happy, Zhang Han felt worthy. After lunch, the noisy crowd all left. All the guests were arranged in the guest rooms near Ziqiang's villa, while Zhang Han and Xin were directly arranged in Ziqiang's villa. The first floor of the villa had 2 bedrooms, its second floor also had 2 bedrooms with enough space. Chapter 438, A Tour of Singapore. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Ziqiang, Xuanhuan, Zipeng, Dongling, Zixia, Wang Ming's family, Zhang Han, Xian, and Meng all sat in the hall on the first floor of Ziqiang's villa, drinking tea and chatting warmly. During this period, Ziqiang played with Meng. Then the little girl ran to Zixia's side and started watching a cartoon. This made Ziqiang a little unhappy. Who put on the cartoon? The little girl's attention was all drawn to it. Seeing the women still chatting, Ziqiang looked at Zhang Han beside and asked him, Han, do you play Go chess? A little bit. Let's play 2 games. Tell you what, I've played Go for decades. I hope you don't give up in the first few minutes, said Ziqiang confidently, while walking to the small table not far behind the sofa and putting out the chessboard. Zipeng came with tea and sat down to watch the game. Come on, let's go. Ziqiang and Zhang Han began to place pieces on the chessboard. In the beginning, the 2 players placed their pieces fast. The black and white stones were constantly crossing each other. It seemed that thousands of troops from both sides were lining up and waiting for the final battle. Gradually, Ziqiang's placing slowed down. Zipeng, as a bystander, couldn't help saying, brother, wrong move. You should place there. Eh? Why did you place it here? Before long Zipeng got lost in the chessboard. He went silent. The 2 players' eyes were fixed on the chessboard. However, Zhang Han checked Meng and Xian every time he placed a piece. Ziqiang and Zipeng were more like 2 players, muttering and studying their moves. Zhang Han was just sitting there to watch. Ah, this move was brilliant. Ziqiang touched his chin as a sudden idea came into his mind. He said, I'll place it here. With a snap, he placed a piece in the middle. Zhang Han picked up one piece and looked at the board. He pretended to gaze at it for a minute, then he placed the stone. Ha, you don't see it, do you? I'll place this here. Your pieces in this area are captured. Ziqiang placed his stone in smug satisfaction. This time, the move was very simple. It was like a long-planned plot that was revealed in the end. Nice, this move is really brilliant. Zipeng applauded. Seeing this, Zhang Han smiled gently. He didn't intend to let him win so easily. Thus, he said, "You don't seem to notice that area." While talking, he placed a piece, rescuing one area of pieces by besieging the other, and it solved the crisis in an instant. Well done, Han. Have you been holding back? You did well, but I'm better. Bang. A piece sets the game. My stone has surrounded yours. How about that? How is my chess skill? Asked Ziqiang with a smile. Zhang Han's eyes slightly squinted. The situation on the chessboard seemed to show a sign of Ziqiang's victory, but Zhang Han had a dozen ways to change it. However, he knew that if he did this, it wouldn't be flattering at all. Hence, he shook his head slightly, looked at Ziqiang in surprise, and said with a smile, "You do excel at chess." "Aha, of course, I have played it for decades. No one in the Ziclan could beat me. Come on, let's play one more game," said Ziqiang cheerfully. He was in a great mood. Poof, Xian laughed out. Ziqiang liked Zhang Han, otherwise, he couldn't have such a good time. Zhang Han glanced at Xian and gave her a warm smile. While they were playing chess, a sycophant stuck around them. Brilliant, amazing. Zipeng looked at the chessboard and acclaimed. Soon, the second game began. The opening was almost the same as the previous game. They placed their pieces fast. Gradually, after half of the chessboard was filled, Ziqiang began to slow down again. "It's smart for you to place here, Han. The move can be act as an attack or a defense. Not so bad, but you didn't notice this area on my side. Ha ha, one piece decides the winner. I've got these two areas together. How would you crack them?" Ziqiang said triumphantly. Zhang Han stared at it, and he said with a smile, "I didn't expect this move. Your skill could compete with a professional player." "Absolutely, my brother attended Singapore's Go competition last time. He made it to the top 16. Many professional players admired him." Zipeng sighed. "Stop saying that. A hero would never speak of his past glories. Come on, Han, it's your turn. Place your piece." Ziqiang glared at Zipeng. It's not easy to meet a match in chess. What if he was scared away? Besides, Ziqiang had prepared a secret fatal move. What if Han became alert and found it? Zhang Han found it amusing when he saw Ziqiang's expression. If Zhang Han took the game more seriously, he could finish it in 2 minutes. Surely, he would never do that. What he was going to do was to play a well-matched game and make the win harder for Ziqiang. Only in this way could his father-in-law have real fun. Beating a matched opponent at chess was better than taking advantage of a rookie. Zhang Han was about to place the piece. Ziqiang's eyes brightened at the location on the chessboard, and he couldn't hide his excitement. Meng waved her hand and shouted, "Papa, Papa, come here." She was sitting on the other side of the sofa watching TV. Zhang Han glanced at her. His hand moved a little bit and put the piece in another direction. Ziqiang froze. He stared at the chessboard. His face looked grave, holding a white stone. He murmured and couldn't decide his next move. "What? Why didn't I notice that? This." His advantage of attack has been eliminated, so he needed to think about it. Zhang Han smiled and said, "You may need time to think about it. I'll take a look over there. Go ahead." That was what Ziqiang needed. Without raising his head, he waved to Zhang Han. Zipeng sat aside, stared at the chessboard for a while, and spoke. "It's a smart move, which solved the crisis. Brilliant. We need to look into it carefully." Zhang Han walked to Meng with a smile. "Papa, see, the papa in the cartoon is also handsome, like you." Meng mumbled, pointing to the cartoon on TV. Zhang Han chuckled and asked, "Which papa is more handsome, me or him?" "You are the most handsome papa in the world." Meng slipped into Zhang Han's arms and said, "The people in the cartoon have gone to explore. They met a big snake that can talk and wants to eat them. So scary." Zhang Han and Meng played for a while. About 5 minutes later, the little girl was completely absorbed in the cartoon. Zhang Han returned to the side of the small table. Ziqiang rested his chin on one hand, still in deep thought. He couldn't keep thinking when Zhang Han was back, so he spoke. I'm waiting for you, see how I break the impasse. Then he didn't hesitate to place one piece. It was just an attack made in one direction to divert attention from the quarter where the real attack was to be made. Zhang Han pretended not to see it and played along with Ziqiang. 3 minutes later, Ziqiang could no longer hold his excitement and placed a piece hard. Bang! The piece made a clear sound. Ziqiang looked at the chessboard for a few more times. He looked serious, letting out a long breath. Thanks, I appreciate it. Zhang Han picked up a piece. He thought where to place it would be more difficult for Ziqiang to win. But after hearing those words, Zhang Han stopped. All right. He took back his piece, shook his head, and said with a smile, marvelous, it's really a good move. Ha ha. Ziqiang laughed and said, you are only 26, Han. You are already an excellent player at your age. Come on, have another game with me. Thus, Ziqiang spent the whole afternoon playing chess with Zhang Han, while Zipeng complimented them from time to time. Zhang Han played the game at ease. Sometimes he looked thoughtful, which was suitable in the condition. Xian would look over from time to time, and Zhang Han seemed to notice that. He would look back at her and sense that she was in a good mood. Rong Jiaxin, Dongling, and the others had been chatting with each other. Meng Meng watched TV for a while, then her big bright eyes looked around. The little girl noticed Xian not paying attention to her, so she looked at Zixia and then focused on the snacks on the side. Well, Aunt Xia, do you want to eat chips? I can give you some snacks. They are over there, said Meng Meng in a low voice, pointing to one big bag of snacks on one side. Ah, Meng Meng is so nice. Thank you for sharing your snacks, said Zixia with a smile. You're welcome, Aunt Xia, you can have some, said Meng Meng seriously. Then I'll get them. Zixia got up with a smile and walked over. Okay. Meng Meng mumbled. She stared at Xian and was a little nervous. Would Mama find out? What if she doesn't let me eat? While Meng Meng was glancing around, Zixia brought the snacks back. She picked up one bag of chips and opened it for Meng Meng. She also opened a bag of shrimp chips for herself. They ate the snacks while watching TV. The cartoon was more suitable for adults, so Meng Meng couldn't concentrate on it and spent most time on eating the chips. On the other side, Xian had noticed what Meng Meng was doing. She chuckled and said nothing. Meng Meng finished one bag and was about to pick up another. Meng Meng. Xin coughed softly. Huh? Meng Meng paused. She thought for a while and put the snacks back on Zixia's legs, murmuring, Aunt Xia, Mama doesn't allow Meng Meng to eat more snacks. You can have them if you want. Then Meng Meng slipped down from the sofa and ran to Xian, playing with two toys. Yan, what do Han and Meng Meng like to eat? It was almost 5 o'clock. Xixiniu said with a smile, your father could cook, and we can eat at home. Xian looked at Ziqiang, who was occupied in playing chess. She shook her head and said, let father play for a while. Let's go out to eat tonight. Let's go to the Ferris wheel. I remember that there were 2 restaurants in the mall before, but I'm not sure whether they are still open or not. Swish. Meng Meng's big eyes suddenly brightened. Looking at Zhen, she said, Mama, what's a Ferris wheel? Ferris wheel is round and tall, replied Xian with a smile. Okay, let's go to the Ferris wheel. Mama, let's go. Meng Meng couldn't wait. Don't worry, we'll go later, said Xian with a smile. I'll make a reservation first, said Dongling. She got up and left to make a phone call. Meng Meng looked up at Xin and asked, when shall we go, Mama? Xian thought and said, well, after your papa and grandpa finish the game. Well, all right. Meng Meng turned to look at Zhang Han. She waved and said, Papa, Grandpa, we are waiting for you. Zhang Han nodded with a light smile. The piece in his hand instantly changed its direction and was placed on a different location. Ziqiang stared at the chessboard, placing a piece to his pattern. They placed a few more pieces, and Zhang Han deliberately placed his last piece with a loud sound. Ziqiang looked at it carefully and froze. Damn. I forgot this part. Hiss. Ziqiang wanted to retract his feint. He thought quickly, before standing up and saying, "Granddaughter, don't worry, let's go now." Then he looked at Zhang Han and laughed, saying, "Han, you are good at chess, but this game is intense. It will take a while to decide a winner. We should continue when we come back." "You are right, we should continue when we are back." Zhang Han nodded with a smile. Then he was astounded. As Ziqiang said, "Well, we will continue when we come back." He put away the chessboard and pieces. "Continue with what? Let's go to the Ferris wheel. It takes more than half an hour to be there." Ziqiang spoke directly after putting away the Go chess. "Let's go." Ziyan smiled and stood up. "Let's go, let's go." Meng cheered with her little arm raised. Everyone took their bags and left. Everyone got on the Ziclan's vehicles, most of which were Audi A8L. They were heading for the Ferris wheel. The Ferris wheel in Singapore was also called the Flyer Ferris wheel. It was famous for its huge size, with a total height of 165 meters and almost 42 stories high. It was located in the bustling commercial center area and placed on the third floor of the shopping center. On the Ferris wheel, people could enjoy not only Singapore's city view but also the scenery 45 kilometers away, which made it a unique scenic spot. Ziyan was quite familiar with Singapore, so she had a plan in mind before she came. Meng was very happy all the way. She kept humming songs. Even from a distance, the huge Ferris wheel was outstanding. After arriving at the place, Ziyan held Zhang Han's hand and said with a smile, "There used to be 2 nice restaurants on the 3rd floor. I remember one of them had seafood noodles that tasted good. Let's have a look." "Okay." Zhang Han smiled and nodded. He pinched Ziyan's white and tender palm and said softly, "Whatever you want to eat, I'll make for you in the future, and I'll take you to taste something. Something you didn't know before. I'm looking forward to it." Ziyan smiled and pursed her lips. Zhang Han was attracted. If there was no one present, he would kiss her. Ziyan felt the affection too. Her big eyes blinked quickly. She wanted to tease him but decided to behave herself as they were surrounded by the elders. Meng looked up at the Ferris wheel and said, "Ah, Papa, what a high Ferris wheel. Let's go have dinner first, and then we'll take a few rounds on the Ferris wheel." Zhang Han chuckled. Thus, they first had dinner in the restaurant of the mall, with Ziqiang's 4 bodyguards. Zhang Han didn't let Instructor Liu follow them. As such, Instructor Liu and the others were invited by Liang Hao to have fun. Of course, Zhao Feng kept following Liang Mengkai. Soon, after dinner, Zhang Han and others went to the Ferris wheel. Each carriage was a lying cylinder, which could take 10 people. The carriage was big enough, allowing people to walk around. Even a few drinks were prepared. Different from normal Ferris wheels, it was more stable and safe. Zhang Han stood in front of the window with Meng and Ziyan in his arms, and they looked at the scenery below. Ziqiang and Zixiniu were standing behind them. Ziqiang was satisfied with this son-in-law. This afternoon, when Ziqiang had been playing chess with Zhang Han, he had actually been testing this young man. He had seen that Zhang Han had been patient all the time, and later he knew the young man had been letting him win. It also aroused Ziqiang's competitive spirit. He didn't know how good Zhang Han's chess skill was, and he was going to find out in the evening after they returned. "Mama will take you to Sentosa tomorrow." Looking at this happy little girl, Ziyan scraped her face. "Well, what is Sentosa? Is it an amusement park?" Meng's eyes brightened. "Yes, there is a water adventure park, a dolphin park, a Royal Albatross, and a Universal Movie City Park." Ziyan smiled and explained. Resorts World Sentosa was a famous family resort in Asia. Ziyan had been there many times in her early ages. It was a collection of food, accommodation, shopping, and entertainment. It had the world's largest aquarium. More importantly, there was a theme hotel. Ziyan planned to stay for another night. The little girl was excited and looking forward to the next day. After the Ferris wheel, they all returned to the Ziklan's manor. Meng Meng behaved well and asked to sleep at about 9 o'clock. Papa, hurry up, tell me a story, we can go to the amusement park tomorrow. Meng Meng couldn't wait and she waved. Coming. Zhang Han and Ziqiang ended another game, before he got up and walked over. You'll sleep in Xian's bedroom. Today I asked someone to buy a small bed. The sheets and other things are new and have been washed, said Xuanhuan with a smile, leading them to the second floor. Xian's bedroom had been empty for many years, but someone would clean it regularly. The room was the same as she had left it. There were many pink dolls, telling a teenager girl's dream. I'm going to sleep. Meng Meng ran to the bed happily. Change your pajamas first. Xian smiled, pulling the large suitcase next to her. She took out her family suit of pajamas. Xuanhuan smiled and said, Yan, Han, and Meng Meng, I'll leave you to rest. See you tomorrow. Okay. Zhang Han smiled and nodded. Meng Meng sat by the bed and waved her hand. Grandma, see you. Xuanhuan also waved, then she went out and closed the door. When they put on pajamas, the family of 3 went to bed, with Meng Meng lying in the middle. She blinked and listened to her father's story. Sometimes she was distracted, thinking about going to the amusement park the next day. The little girl would feel thrilled. For her, the happiest thing in the world was to visit an amusement park with Papa and Mama. Chapter 439, Boat of Curse. The dwarfs and elves met a few giants on the island. They were very big. When they met, they got into a fight, which went on and on. Later, Zhang Han was telling the story to Meng Meng in a low voice. In the beginning, Meng Meng listened with great interest and would ask, how big is the giant? Is it as high as the Ferris wheel today? Zhang Han replied softly, it's not that high. The giant is as tall as 10 people together. Well, it's higher than a big monkey. Meng Meng was a little tired, so she stopped asking questions. She listened to the story and eventually fell asleep. Zhang Han gently held the little girl and put her on the small bed next to theirs. He covered her with a small blanket and then returned to the big bed. Xian turned to press her soft body on Zhang Han, blowing sweet breath in his ear. We will get engaged on the 19th. Zhang Han chuckled, leaned over, and whispered to Xian, how do you feel, nervous? Xian bit her lips and said, I'm not nervous. What about you? Happy, of course. Just happy? Happy, delighted, proud. It's the first time I'm doing this. Maybe I'll be excited because you'll be my wife then, said Zhang Han with a smile. Well, how many times do you want to be engaged? Once in my life is enough. Hee hee, my parents like you, not because you are powerful. Xian pulled her head back and blinked her big eyes. You are the best man in my life, she said. Then she leaned forward and kissed Zhang Han. Zhang Han grinned. He stroked Xian's hair with his hand and said softly, you are the best too. In our words, you will be a wife who is good for her husband. Xian pouted her red lips and murmured, then I'll always be good to you. Gulp. Staring at Xian's delicate face, Zhang Han swallowed and was aroused a little bit. Seeing Zhang Han's hot gaze, Xian quickly put her finger on Zhang Han's lips, whispering, no, tomorrow we will stay in a theme hotel. All right then. Zhang Han grinned and kissed her gently on the forehead. He suppressed the affection in his heart, holding her tighter in his arms. They cuddled up together and chatted for a while, eventually falling asleep. People would get up earlier in the morning when they slept earlier at night. At 6:30 in the morning, the little girl woke up. She looked at the big bed and found her papa was already awake. Papa, I'm coming. Meng Meng got off her small bed, walking on the floor barefooted. Then she jumped into the big bed. Papa, why did I sleep on the small bed again? I want to sleep in the big bed. Meng Meng mumbled, well, Momo is worried that we will press you. Well, Momo is still sleeping. We are going to the amusement park today, Papa. Meng Meng remembered it when she was up. While father and daughter were talking, Xian's long eyelashes trembled, and she opened her eyes. The family of three were lying in bed for a while, and then Xian took Meng Meng to the bathroom with her stuff. Because they were going out to play today, Xian wore a pair of simple shorts, a white t-shirt and sneakers. Zhang Han still dressed formal, and Meng Meng put on blue short-sleeved shirt and white pants. When they were ready, Xuanhuan came up and said with a smile, "Come down and sit for a while, we will have breakfast right away." "Grandma, shall we go after breakfast?" asked Meng Meng, holding Zhang Han's hand and looking up. Xuanhuan stopped at her words and replied with a smile soon after, "Of course, we will go out and have fun today. Yay." Meng Meng cheered and giggled. They went downstairs to the dining room, the decoration of which was blue. It made people feel fresh. There was a rectangular table that allowed 10 people to sit, but it was only equipped with 6 chairs. On the left side was a glass wall. Through a door was the kitchen. Ziqiang was busy in the kitchen. On the table were several glasses of milk, thumb-sized steamed bread, fried ham and lettuce leaves, and square slices of bread, one side of which was fried with eggs. There were also 2 bottles of salad dressing for the sandwich. After they sat down, Ziqiang took off his apron and came over with 2 plates. 5 peeled eggs were on one plate, fried lettuce with mushrooms on the other. The breakfast was delicate and healthy. "You are here." Ziqiang looked at Meng Meng and smiled. He sat down and said to them, "Have some breakfast, taste the milk-flavored bread, Grandpa specially made for you." Ziqiang picked up a small steamed bread and handed it to Meng Meng's plate. Meng Meng took a small bite. "Delicious, it has the taste of milk, and it's sweet." Meng Meng babbled. Her words made Ziqiang smile contentedly. He looked at Zhang Han and Xian and said, "Cooking is also learning. No matter how rich you are, sometimes you should cook for yourself. It will relax your body and mind, and the food made by yourself is safer." Before he could finish talking, Meng Meng added, "Papa's food tastes better." "What?" Ziqiang stopped. "Pooh." Xian chuckled and said, "Dad, you forget that we have a restaurant in Hong Kong, and Zhang Han is very good at cooking." "Yes, Papa is the best cook." "Grandpa, when you go to Hong Kong, Papa could cook for you. You will know then," said Meng Meng seriously. "All right." Ziqiang curled his lips. He looked at Zhang Han and said, "Han, I didn't know you can cook." "Yes, I can," replied Zhang Han with a smile. "You cook every day?" Ziqiang asked again. "Yes," replied Zhang Han. Ziqiang shook his head and said, "Right, Yan can't cook, she knows nothing about it." Having her in the kitchen was more of a hindrance than a help. "Who said that?" Xian disagreed and retorted, "I once cooked with him. I've made super delicious barbecued meat. When you come to Hong Kong, I'll make some for you." She was actually a little nervous, saying those words. What she did was ordering around rather than cooking. Zhang Han had never let her in the kitchen. He had said that she was too delicate, and the smoke was bad for her. She thought her husband had been taking care of her like a baby. He was the best and most thoughtful husband in the world. Xian looked at Zhang Han tenderly. Hearing what Xian said, Ziqiang smiled and nodded. "Okay, we'll go to Hong Kong. I'll take a vacation and have a rest. Then I'll have more strength for the new business when I return." The trip to Hong Kong had 2 purposes. First, Ziqiang wanted to spend more time with his granddaughter. Second, he could inspect the local market. Zhang Han's partner, Liu Qingfeng, had once offered him cooperation, and he had said Ziqiang could work with him anytime. With Liu Qingfeng's wide connections overseas, Ziqiang could enter China's market more easily. The Zhi clan happened to have 2 projects, so he thought this time would be an opportunity to work with Liu Qingfeng. "I'll make sure you don't want to come back," Xian declared with a smile. "So cocky, then I'd like to see how delicious your food is." Ziqiang grinned. Then they began to have breakfast. After dinner, they had a rest and went out at about 7:30. This time, only Zipeng, Dongling, and Zixia went out with them. 3 Audi A8L slowly left the Ziclan's manor and arrived at Resorts World Sentosa after more than 40 minutes driving. After getting off, Zhixiu asked, "What's our first stop?" Xian smiled and said, "Universal Studios first." The Universal Studios was large. They first visited the Hollywood theme area and took many family photos of Zhang Han, Xian and Meng Meng. Zhixiu admired Xian. Even if she was not a star, her family of 3 would become online influencers because they were so pretty. After a tour in the Hollywood theme area, they reached the science fiction world. Meng Meng was happy in both places. Then they went to the Lost World, Remote Kingdom, and other 7 theme areas. Fortunately, it was not during the holidays. The place wasn't as crowded as it was in the Golden Week holidays of October 1st. However, when they left the theme park, it was 11:30. Happy time passed fast. They decided to visit the Sea Aquarium and have lunch later. The Sea Aquarium was one of the largest aquariums in the world, with more than 10,000 of marine animals, such as sideburns sharks and other animal stars, the dazzle of which attracted people. They came to a glass window, in which a diver swam to their side. When Meng Meng saw him, she pulled her hand from Zhang Han and waved to him. "Hi, how are you?" The diver inside also waved and stopped moving. Meng Meng paused and then raised her arms. The diver also raised his arms. "Papa, he is copying me." Meng Meng looked at Zhang Han and pointed herself. The diver inside looked up at Zhang Han and pointed himself as well. Puff. Meng Meng thought of an expression quickly. She pressed 2 fingers on her little face and swelled her cheeks, pursing a cute round mouth as a goldfish. The diver in there froze. He couldn't copy this difficult expression. Thus, he fled and swam to the other side, interacting with other tourists. Meng Meng chuckled and said, "Papa, he's gone." Then they left and went to have lunch. Their next spot was the Water Adventure Park. When they arrived there, Meng Meng cheered. The water park was built with originality. The water maglev slide, and its reverse slide were a totally different experience to Meng Meng. People could snorkel with 20,000 fish in colorful reefs. In the crystal clear water, people could see and even touch the fish with their hands. In the water park, Zhang Han, Xian, and Meng Meng sat in a banana boat. They glided down the high-altitude slide, past the incline, and then fell into the swimming pool. The water splashed all over the pool, and Meng Meng and Xian screamed out. In addition to 7 thrilling games, they also tried a dozen interesting theme projects. Meng Meng laughed all the time and had great fun. It was getting dark, so Xian looked at the time. She said, "We have pretty much tried every project. Let's go to the Bay restaurant for dinner." "All right." Meng Meng had a great time, so she nodded. They arrived at the Bay restaurant and had dinner on the terrace while overlooking the water park. It was a perfect way to end the day. After dinner, Ziqiang looked at the time and asked them, "It's 8 o'clock. Shall we go back?" "We won't go back today, we'll stay at the Castle Hotel," said Xian softly. Ziqiang thought and said, "Stay here?" "Okay, let's stay. So many places we didn't visit, we could go tomorrow." "Oh?" Meng Meng was excited again. She said happily, "Well, we can play for another day. Papa, Mama, let's go to sleep now." Everyone was amused by her. "We have one place left to go now," said Xian with a smile. "Where?" asked Meng Meng. "To see the crane ballet." Xian scraped Meng Meng's cute nose. "Let's go, but I want Papa to carry me. Meng Meng is tired." Meng Meng stretched 2 small arms to Zhang Han. "If you are tired, Grandpa will carry you." Ziqiang opened his arms to welcome Meng Meng. "No, I want Papa." Meng Meng refused directly. Ziqiang thought that he needed to work harder to be closer to Meng Meng. They went to the scenic spot of the crane ballet. The crane ballet of Resorts World Sentosa was the largest outdoor electric motor performance in the world so far, setting up a standard for night entertainment. The whole performance made people feel like in a dream. After the performance, They strolled around and the time came to 9:30. They went to the Castle Hotel, one of the 6 luxury hotels. Castle Hotel only received VIP guests and had a membership system. Ziqiang didn't have a membership, but he made a phone call to the owner of the hotel. They were greeted by the manager when they arrived, and they checked in the most luxurious suite. One interesting thing happened when they walked into the hall and waited for the elevator. They ran into a group of people: Zhao Feng, Instructor Liu, Zif, Zhang Li, Liang Hao, and Liang Mengkai came out from the elevator. "Oh, what a coincidence, Uncle Ziqiang, Aunt Xu, Sister Ziyan, boss, you have come here." Liang Mengkai greeted them with a smile. Meng pouted and said with pride, "Well, we've been playing all day, we'll continue to play tomorrow." "Okay." Liang Mengkai laughed. After they greeted each other, Liang Mengkai and the others went out. For them, nightlife had just started. Seeing Zhao Feng dressed casually, Zhang Han bonded. He thought the company's staff should have their day off. Every employee's holiday should be 3 months a year. Anyway, they should have their own private life, and they couldn't be single forever. Whether they wanted to get married, or hung out with someone, or leave the company, it was their choice. Zhang Han would say nothing. It was just in his mind. No one in the security group would actually leave. Until many years later, no one would leave, and even someone would die in the war. Perhaps Zhang Han's personal charisma had confirmed them in their rooted belief. On the top 17th floor of the hotel, Ziyan said, "I want to stay in Princess House." "Fine, Princess House is yours," said Ziqiang with a smile. "Mama should stay in Princess House. Mama will be the princess. Meng will be the princess daughter, and Papa is the prince." Meng muttered in Zhang Han's arms. "Ha ha." Ziqiang looked at the little girl and laughed. Actually, he wanted to play with Meng for a while, but it was late, thus, he went to rest early. Princess's house was also a luxury suite. One could feel its inner magnificence once entered. Its hall had a sofa, TV and other items. In the center of the master bedroom was a pink round bed that was twice the size of an ordinary bed. Light pink curtains surrounded the bed. Outside of the balcony was a glass window. In front of the window was a hot spring pool, with 4 reclining chairs floating. There were 2 bedrooms on the left and right sides, cinemas, gyms, and so on. "Let's go to the bedroom." Ziyan's eyes brightened. Zhang Han stared at them and knew her intention. He laughed and entered the bedroom on the left. After they lay on the bed, Zhang Han began to tell stories. His voice was very low as if he had the magic of hypnosis. Their little girl fell asleep in 10 minutes. Zhang Han smiled and carried Ziyan in his arms. He walked out of the bedroom and closed the door gently, then they fell into the king bed. Pajamas were soon thrown aside, followed by Ziyan's groan of pleasure. Her groan was low, and it was suppressed. The time went by slowly. At about 12 o'clock, Zhang Han roared in a low voice, and Ziyan let out a cry. A romantic intercourse ended. They cuddled in bed for a while, before going into the hot spring water and leaning on a water reclining chair. At that moment, ding! Zhang Han's mobile phone rang. With a wave, the mobile phone on the bed floated into his hand. The screen showed an unknown number of Singapore, and Zhang Han answered the phone directly. "Director Zhang, I'm Sulong. Something horrible happened. I can't figure it out. Do you want to take a look?" "What's wrong?" asked Zhang Han. A huge empty ship appeared on the surface of the water. It's near the sea. According to its route, it's about to hit Darkwind Island. I sense there's some strange array on the ship, but I'm not sure, so I wanted to ask Director Zhang to have a look at it. Sulong sounded serious. Hearing the words, Zhang Han was lost in thought. Is it the boat of curse I saw at the bottom of the sea? Zhang Han paused. It's late at night, and I have time. Sulong nodded. Okay, I'm in. I know, in Sentosa, I've sent a helicopter to get you. I just called Ziqiang, that's how I got your number, said Sulong. Okay, replied Zhang Han and hung up the phone. Are you going by yourself or? Asked Xian curiously. Let's go together. Your father could babysit Meng for a while, replied Zhang Han. What are we going to see? It's a ship. Zhang Han smiled and looked at Xian. He said, that is a boat of curse. A strange boat. We saw it at the bottom of the sea that day when we fished for treasure. As long as we don't get close, it's not dangerous, so I'm going to take you to have a look. Oh, if there is no danger, we could take a look, said Xian and stood up from the pool. She was like a lotus flower rising from water, and Zhang Han couldn't stop staring at her. He was going to have another round. Then he thought about it and decided to continue when they returned. Hence, they both started to put on their clothes. Chapter 440, A relic came out after striking. After putting on the clothes, Xian dialed Ziqiang's number. Although it was almost 12 o'clock, Su Long had just gotten in touch with her father and learned that he had not fallen asleep yet. Therefore, the phone only rang twice before being picked up. Ziqiang asked in doubt, "Hello, Xiaoyan, did Elder Su call you? What is it?" He definitely had something urgent since he had called Xian at midnight. Xian replied, "He did ask us for help, and I'm going to go out with Zhang Han. Can you come here to look after Meng for a while, Dad?" "Ah, well, I'll come over with your mom now," said Ziqiang before hanging up. "They're coming, so let's open the door." Xian walked to the door, holding Zhang Han's hand, and they opened it after changing shoes. In less than 1 minute, Ziqiang and Xuanhuan arrived. "Han, where are you going?" asked Xuanhuan. "We plan to help Su Long to check something," replied Zhang Han with a chuckle. "When will you come back?" asked Ziqiang again. "In about 2 or 3 hours," replied Zhang Han. Ziqiang said while looking into the bedroom, "Well, just go. We'll attend to Meng here." "Is she in the bedroom?" "Yes, she seldom wakes up at night. If so, you can give us a call, Dad," said Xian. "Fine, okay." Ziqiang immediately put on the slippers and went straight to the bedroom after responding. Zhang Han and Xian looked at each other with a chuckle, then closed the door and left. They headed for the elevator, but Xian's face suddenly changed after taking a few steps. "Ouch!" Zhang Han asked in confusion. "What's wrong?" The sheet has not been cleaned up yet." Xian blushed and said with great awkwardness, "How embarrassed I will feel if they see it." The two of them had had sex in the bed for more than an hour, and it was in a total mess now. As long as others took a look at it, they would realize what had happened just now. Zhang Han compressed his mouth and said, "Your parents should have gone directly to the bedroom. It's fine, isn't this a normal thing? We have given birth to a baby, so they definitely know that we must have done that several times. Besides, that's enough. There's someone looking at us in front." Xian stretched out her tender hand and gently pinched Zhang Han's waist. "Ha, he should be waiting for us." Zhang Han glanced at the man in a suit standing in front of the elevator. The man was staring at them with a respectful and polite look, obviously waiting for them. As they approached, the man in the suit rushed up and said with a smile, "Hello, Mr. Zhang, Miss Z. I am a member of the spirit group, and I came here to pick you up. The helicopter is ready." Zhang Han nodded slightly. The man in the suit pressed the elevator button, and the three of them entered it to leave the castle hotel. Just on the square on their left was a helicopter. As soon as they walked out of the hotel, Xian felt a bit cold due to the breeze at night, so she subconsciously crossed her arms tightly. Zhang Han directly took off his coat. "Put it on." "Fine." Xian blinked her beautiful eyes and put on Zhang Han's coat, feeling flattered. The man in the suit next to them could not help but smile after catching sight of what was happening out of the corner of his eye. He sighed with emotion in his mind. The more powerful and enchanting the people were, the more easygoing they would be. He had seen a 21-year-old peak strength warrior, who had even walked with great momentum, and his chin had almost reached the sky. He also had seen a 24-year-old profound stage master, showing his ability to the full extent wherever he went. Surprisingly, now, He had utterly failed to feel the strong aura of the man beside him, though Zhang Han was an outright grandmaster. However, the captain of the spirit group had once told him that the easygoing and caring man next to him had a nickname. In Hong Kong, people secretly called him Fierce Zhang. Before coming here, the captain had repeatedly warned him of adopting a friendly attitude. The man was particularly curious about Zhang Han, so he sized him up secretly from time to time. As for Xian, who was next to Zhang Han, the man did not dare to take a look. "Mr. Zhang, Miss Zi, please board the helicopter." As they walked in front of the helicopter, the man in the suit reached out his hand to make a gesture. Okay. Zhang Han took the lead in boarding the helicopter, holding Xian's hand. After the man in the suit got on the helicopter, the propeller started spinning up and the helicopter quickly flew to the targeted sea area. Singapore also appeared different at night. Zhang Han and Xian were looking down. At that moment, Xian was in high spirits, showing something to Zhang Han from time to time. "Look there, it is Jade Park. I used to pass that place every day when I was in elementary school. The bright building is a museum, which probably has been rebuilt, because it looks much bigger than before. Ouch, I haven't returned to Singapore for more than 7 years, and it has changed a lot. I can't recognize some places." Zhang Han smiled, holding Xian's hand. After listening to her for a while, he said with a smile, "I heard from father-in-law that you were very naughty when you were young." "No." He talked irresponsibly. Xian soon turned and shook her head a few times, like shaking a rattle. "I was only a little naughty when at 3 or 4 years old. After that, I was no longer naughty." "Really? Are you indeed so awesome?" Zhang Han revealed a surprised expression. "Yeah?" Xian nodded seriously, then she reacted and reached out her hand to pinch Zhang Han's waist, grumbling gracefully, "You're so annoying. Ha ha ha." Zhang Han burst out laughing. Soon, they arrived in the targeted sea area within half an hour. The sky was clear and bright, with a silver moon. The man in the suit nearby coughed slightly and pointed to the island outside the window beneath him. "Mr. Zhang, the one below us is Darkwind Island. Actually, Captain Su and his companions are only a dozen nautical miles away from here," he said. "Oh, this island isn't very small." Xian glanced at the island several times with her big eyes, vaguely seeing its outline in the air. Zhang Han looked down and sized it up carefully without saying anything. Soon, they saw more than a dozen frigates appearing on the sea, not far ahead. The left one was an aircraft carrier, so the helicopter approached it and landed slowly. After walking down the helicopter, they saw 40-50 people standing at the left edge of the deck. Zhang Han glanced at them, discovering that everyone, including Su Long, had a dignified expression. Director Zhang. Su Long took a few steps towards and greeted with a nod. "The boat is here, and you can check it first," said Su Long. "Fine." Zhang Han held Xian's hand and walked to the edge of the deck. After arriving at the destination, they noticed that both ships were radiating lights in front of them. While several lights illuminated a specific area of seawater, a vast shadow slowly moved forward underwater. "Ah!" Xian got a fright after seeing what was happening. She could not help covering her mouth as her eyes widened. The huge shadow, like a whale drifting slowly, came into view. At that point, they could merely see its clear black outline. However, it was more than twice as enormous as the aircraft carrier here, which gave people a strong sense of oppression. Zhang Han was a little startled. Sure enough, it was the boat he had seen at the bottom of the sea. This black boat, with a looming appearance, similar to a large cruise ship, was surrounded by black mist. However, it was relatively weird that the deck of the boat was as flat as the aircraft carrier. No one was on it, but it moved forward as if the boat were conscious, which chilled all the people present. Several fishermen, on 5 fishing boats, discovered this vessel. One of the boats possibly hit the underwater hull when they dropped the fishing nets. As a result, Su Long's eyes slightly narrowed, and he said slowly, "The fishing boat turned into a cloud of black fog and was inhaled into the sea." All 6 people on it died. We just tried a few different rounds of ammunition to hit it, but they all disappeared inexplicably. Moreover, we found that once the fish accidentally touch the hull, they will also turn into a cloud of black fog. I suspect that a strange spatial formation exists on it. After that remark, more than 20 people behind Su Long looked at Zhang Han. They all were superiors in the spirit group, almost all of whom were chi strength masters. However, they were only filled with dread for such a situation. No one dared to dive into the sea or send someone else to investigate, for it was too strange. It seems that it will hit Darkwind Island in around 10 minutes. It will be fine if it stops. Once it passes through Darkwind Island, it will hit the mainland in 2 hours, causing an unexpected sensation at that time, said Su Long in a deep voice. I don't know if Director Zhang is aware of any specific details. Everyone around Su Long fell silent. They just looked at Zhang Han, waiting for his input. Even Xian was somewhat nervous because the ship in the sea was excessively huge and weird. Under everyone's gaze, Zhang Han looked at the underwater boat. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. This is a boat of curse, Zhang Han said in a low voice slowly. I think something is sleeping in the boat. What it did was unconscious, and it seems to be foraging. Judging by current situation, its goal is Darkwind Island. As for the curse, only when I board a ship will I feel it. However, I am uncertain now, so. After finishing speaking, Zhang Han shook his head slightly, showing that he would not take risks. In other words, the ship somewhat frightened Zhang Han. He was aware that he could not touch it safely by right of his current strength. Just now, Zhang Han had used his treasure-sniffing nose, by which he could sniff the air within a few kilometers. However, his soul sense could not penetrate the cloud of black fog surrounding the underwater boat. Nevertheless, even so, Zhang Han caught a whiff of a strange odor. It seemed that there were plenty of treasures, relatively high-end ones, in the boat. After Zhang Han finished his analysis, the faces of everyone present changed. Among them, a majority of people could not help but gasp. They looked at the underwater boat again, feeling that it was like a ferocious beast. It gave them goosebumps. Curse, curse, such a huge boat of curse? Ah! Su Long's eyes instantly widened, as he looked at the underwater boat under. His eyes were imbued with fear. He had heard, seen, and fought against the cursed technique. In fact, he could even find a way to deal with the Grand Masters who were proficient in the law of curse. But in the face of this ship, this damned over 500-meter-long boat of curse was too frightening. Is it targeting Darkwind Island? Asked Su Long while looking at Zhang Han. There is an 80% chance, replied Zhang Han. What the hell is it? Isn't the curse a technique? How can it forage? Said Su Long hesitantly. Because the curses are divided into various kinds. Maybe you haven't seen too many, and they are too low-end. Zhang Han could feel that a certain creature was sleeping in that boat of curse. That boat of curse was just something it unconsciously controlled, meaning the curse was its protection. Such an idea did arouse Zhang Han's interest. If he did not have a family, he would take the opportunity to dive into the water and enter the boat. However, now, he had a family, Xian and Meng. Hence, he did not want to take risks. Hiss. Su Long took a deep breath and shook his head slightly, saying, can it sink Darkwind Island? Under normal circumstances, it won't. Zhang Han gave an ambiguous response. But it is really strange. We just have to wait. Alas, we can do nothing but wait. Su Ling sighed gently. At that point, Xian, who was standing beside Zhang Han, tightened her arms. Only when she clung to Zhang Han could she feel more secure. Seeing that they no longer asked Zhang Han, Xian whispered, the huge boat is scary. Will it suddenly appear above sea? Zhang Han chuckled and answered casually, there's nothing terrible, as long as we keep a distance. Moreover, it won't. Unexpectedly, he didn't get a chance to finish speaking. Zoom, zoom. Suddenly, a shocking metallic friction sound was heard. Resounded. The boat of curse, like a behemoth, slowly rose from the water, lifting up more than 20 meters high waves. When it was completely exposed and appeared on the sea, everyone's face changed. It was colossal. Even the aircraft carrier, the warlord on the sea, became negligible, let alone people who were like ants before it. Zhang Han's mouth trembled slightly, and he looked at the boat with dissatisfaction. "You humiliated me. I was just about to say no, but you actually rose to the surface of the sea." The boat's massive hull created pressure for all present, even though the aircraft carrier and the frigate stayed at a safe distance. The command rushed and gave an order. They needed to stay further away from the boat of curse. They had to stay at its two sides, like escorting it, and sail through wind, as well as waves. Their destination was the same as the huge boat, Darkwind Island. As they approached Darkwind Island, Sulong's eyes began to be filled with concerns. Many others gradually became nervous. Gulp. Sulong kept an eye on the huge boat and swallowed his saliva. "It doesn't matter even if Darkwind Island sinks after being struck. I'm only afraid that it will target the mainland. If so, do you have any way to stop it?" he asked Zhang Han. Zhang Han did not give a response after hearing his question, but he sized up the ship. 20 seconds later, he said firmly, "It is indeed targets Darkwind Island." At that time, it approached Darkwind Island, while the aircraft carrier and the frigate stopped. As Zhang Han finished speaking, clatter, clatter. Suddenly, something strange happened with the boat of curse again. It actually floated out of the sea. The hull rose, lifting up mountains of waves once again. Under everyone's gaze, it flew more than 10 meters in the sky, heading toward the largest beach on Darkwind Island. How can it fly? My gosh, is it possible? It's so terrible. Many people, whether on the aircraft carrier or the frigate, were dumbfounded. They completely failed to comprehend such an incredible scene. As for the superiors, they stared at the huge boat fearlessly. They were envious. If they could master such technology, they could master the initiative of the sea. Under everyone's gaze, the hull flew straight to the beach, which was in front of the lush trees. Suddenly, kaboom! A dull thud, like the sound of hitting something with the prow of the giant boat, reverberated. However, there was nothing left in the ship. Many people were startled. In the next moment, Zhang Han took a closer look and spat out 2 words, "A world lit." Suddenly, the prow of the boat lit up, like ripples shining in the sky. Then, it illuminated the surroundings with intense light as if a corner of the world was torn. The prow of the ship faded into the world swiftly, and then, in just 30 seconds, the entire ship fell into it and disappeared. The ripples that could accommodate the hull were still flashing, shrinking at a macroscopic speed. Eventually, under everyone's gaze, the fluctuations narrowed to a circumference of 20 meters, turning into a white foggy cloud, which was like a football. Sulong's expression was extremely stiff, and he looked at Zhang Han with great amazement. Did a relic actually come out after striking? This is really... Sulong was rendered speechless, for he had never imagined that an ancient relic would actually appear on account of the strike of the huge boat. "Grandmaster Liu, we'll detect the level of the relic right now," said Sulong to a thin man in his early 50s. "Fine." He nodded. At that point, Sulong also relaxed, so he asked Zhang Han with a smile while looking at him, "Do you want to go with us, Grandmaster Zhang?" "Okay." Zhang Han nodded. Thus, they boarded 2 helicopters and soon reached one side of the beach. Since Xian was also quite curious at that time, she blinked her big eyes and looked around. After getting off the helicopter with a dozen men, her expression was like that of a curious baby. Grandmaster Liu stepped into the cloud of fog and walked around 9 times. Finally, he looked at the jungle, as well as the mountains behind it. In the end, he stood in front of the fog, closing his eyes. "Hey, what is he doing?" asked Xian with curiosity. "Preparing to detect the level of the relic," answered Sulong with a smile. "Oh." Xian responded and was somewhat curious. wanting to ask how to detect with his eyes closed. However, she did not ask more questions at the thought of the mysterious martial arts world. "He is regulating his breathing and ready to display profound skills," explained Zhang Han with a chuckle. "What are profound skills?" Xian looked at Zhang Han with a trace of pride in her eyes. "My husband is an immortal who knows everything. He is really awesome." Zhang Han replied in a whispering voice to Xian, "Profound skills are." After talking about 2 minutes, as Grandmaster Liu moved, Xian looked over, so Zhang Han stopped talking. Dragon hovers beside the water spring of the beak. Grandmaster Liu's eyes suddenly brightened with his fingers moving quickly. As he stepped down, he rose 1/2 meter in the sky, seemingly very mysterious. "In the meanwhile," he said constantly, "the dragon is fixed in the true hole of the edge hill. The wind blows once the door is. The dragon already sees the sun ring. The wind starts blowing." As Grandmaster Liu finished speaking, the white mist in the area of more than 10 meters suddenly shook 3 times.